Okay, we'll come to order. This is the Tuesday study session, October 25th, starting at 3 o'clock today. You may not be seeing this live. So, City Clerk?
Roll call with the exception of Councilmember Rosansky. All council members are present.
Okay, clarification of items on the consent agenda. Mr. Nichols? All right, we'll start at the other end. Mr. Selich?
No, I have nothing.
Mr. Webb?
Yes. The item where we're requalifying for, is that item 4? Yeah, Orange County Transportation Authority. On the project for Jamboree Road improvements, did you modify the plans on that project, or will you, to where we have the additional length of the left turn lane that we talked about during budget time last year?
Yes, that would be included. We're also considering the option of maybe doing it separately in case the timing isn't approved at OCTA. We would like to probably get that done before the next calendar year if possible, and assuming that gets approved by OCTA and it becomes part of the agreement, we'll go ahead and add that work in.
Okay, is there any way that you can put projects in that are in somebody else's district besides Councilman Daigle's?
What was that?
Well, if you'd like to widen Mariner's Mile, I can include that.
We have the Centennial in your district, centered in District 4.
I was just asking if...
That's all right.
Are you talking about that riding arena again?
No. I'm
I know
talking
you're talking
about this road project list that has almost 99% of the projects are in your district. I was just wondering if any of the other council members could get any projects sometime soon.
Talking about the county and octa funds, you mean?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they have money up there.
The question I would have is, what about 55 on an extension of 55
Wait a
and
minute.
underground?
Let's take this to the order.
Okay, that was, Steve answered the question that I was asking him if he had provided in the design the extension of the left turn lane that Councilmember Daigle had asked us to look at last June. And his answer was, yes, they would either include it that way or as a separate project.
Mr. Ridgway?
Nothing, thank you.
Councilman Daigle?
Nothing to pull, but I'm really looking forward to Councilman Webb's help and insights and his many years of expertise on the road projects going on up there.
All right. Mr. Rosansky?
None, thank you.
All right. Mr. Nichols, back to you.
Okay. I do have some that I'd like to get clarified. The project on item 6, which is the CEQA on the project at Coast Highway in Dover. My question is how do we know that this is mitigated negative deck on this, and why should we not do the study before that's determined? Or why do we even bother doing the study if we have already determined it?
What we typically do is receive some technical studies very early in our review of a project, such as traffic, and with that information, we're able to make, at the staff level, a preliminary determination of what the environmental document is likely to be that we're going to need. And so then we contract with the consulting firm to prepare that document, which we have done here, and now we need to amend that contract. The decision as to whether that is the appropriate document is not made until the project goes before the Planning Commission, and they consider the project and the environmental review.
It seems like a pretty large project to make that decision so early, is my comment. But I'm going to withhold other comments on that. The Corona del Mar State Beach, I would like to see an update on where we are on that project, Homer or Steve, and I would also like to have some idea why we didn't consider where the volleyball courts are ahead of time. And I have another question, and that is, we are talking about a third man, and apparently a three-man team in this lifeguard tower, 2 lifeguards, and now we got a marine resource director, or what the hell is that?
Those questions
Are we-
answered
are we-
now, or do you want
No,
to
I
answer when you're...
sort of
You
like
gonna
pull
pull
the
it?
item?
You're going to pull it?
I'm gonna pull
He's
it.
going to pull it. He's just giving you a little...
Okay, then, that, the block grant development, I think it's a good idea that we look at that too, on who gets that, and the reasoning for that, I would like to know separately, but I don't particularly want that as a public item. Let me see what else I have. Oh, and lastly, I think we ought to have some discussion on certainly that marathon. It's a lot of money, but I'd like to know what kind of funding. He thought a lot of that would be offset funding for costs that we might incur within the city. In other words, if we have to provide police protection or something like that for the marathon, have you already made some kind of agreements with him, or?
No, the thinking is if the city were going to be a gold sponsor, that we would charge certainly for all of the overtime services and personnel services associated with that event.
Well, my question sometime, I think we ought to get some idea what the cost the city will have, because most of the event is in Irvine this time, and he's just going up San Miguel until basically he goes over Newport Coast, I guess it is, and out of the city. He's out of the city then. So we do not have, we have a limited amount of the race actually is within our domain. And so my question is would we get, would there be a reasonable amount of offsetting costs, or would this be pretty much a single donation? But that's something I think you need to do some homework on, so I'm not sure just how to handle that. I'm not going to call it, is what I'm saying.
All right.
I need to ask the question. Okay, and that's everything I have. Thank you.
Okay, it's back to me. Item 6, Dover PCH Retail. We're doing a EIR. My question, is that based, we're doing whatever we're doing?
Right, mitigated neg deck.
Mitigated neck deck. Is that based upon the premise that that's 6 lanes through there or 4? And if it's 4, it's 5?
One of the mitigations is to do some additional widening of the road in that area.
And when are we going to know what that is?
When it goes to the Planning Commission for public hearing.
No, but when you do your EIR, does that assume it is 5 lanes, or does this assume some 30 years in the future that we've got 6 lanes through there, or?
No, it's a mitigation for the project.
Okay, so they look upon it as being 4 lanes, and then the additional mitigation that's being proposed as part of the condition of approval?
Yes, unless you're talking about all of Mariner's Mile being widened.
No, I'm just talking about
is
this project.
Just in front of this project, yes.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
the project proposes to construct the ultimate width or the widened width of Coast Highway across the frontage of the development, and a new traffic signal at their entrance as a part of it, and so that the really short transition that is there today will be lengthened to where it's an appropriate length, and so that if or when Coast Highway is widened later on, they won't have to do any work in this area because it will be of sufficient width.
No, but my question is, when you do your traffic studies, is it based upon the premise that that is a throughput, 5 lanes, 6 lanes, however you count them, all the way through Mariner's Mile, or only in front of this particular project? So you're going to narrow it down again, and just, all you've done is extended the funnel further down the street?
I think it's just the extension of
Okay,
the funnel,
that's
as we
fine.
put it.
So that's how they do their study, not
Yes.
as if on a premise that it's all the way through. Number 7, I agree with Mr. Nichols. I think an overall review of Corona State Beach projects in order. Big Canyon Reservoir cover, this is a question for Steve Badum, whether that final cost was over or under our projected budget, because we're accepting the work. Did it come in okay?
Yes, it did.
Good. Well, then we don't need to talk about that. Good. Item 9, CDVG grants. I'd like to also, I'm going to pull that. My question is, why are we spending $54,000 administering a program that only gives 25 grant outside, most of it's internally? In other words, well, what happens to the money? Most of it goes to the loan program. Why do we need to spend that sort of money to administer this?
Because we still have to do all of this reporting to HUD, and we still have to monitor each of the agencies that receives a public services grant.
John, I think that, isn't it the CDBG, excuse me, isn't that like $500,000? That's not the other program?
Yes.
That's a different program.
Sharon, if we fail to do this reporting, could we potentially be in default on our loan?
Yeah, we might be,
Because we wouldn't
because-
accept the funds and couldn't
We would be at
transfer.
risk for getting any
Yeah.
more community
Well, I guess
development
my
block
question
grant
is,
money.
it's $54,000 to do the report. How much money is spent outside of the city? In other words, a lot of this money goes to the loan program that's down in Balboa Village. How much money goes outside versus how much does it cost to administer this program?
I think I can find that out by
Find
this-
that out, we don't need to pull
I think the
that.
staff
think-
report said 15%, basically 15%, and we're authorized up to 20% by the regulations.
No, but what I'm saying is that if we're spending $54,000 to do this report, how much money goes to agencies that you have to monitor versus just writing a check internally for the loan program?
My
In other words-
recollection, John, is that we spent about $170,000 or $180,000 in debt service on the loan, and about $230,000 or $240,000 that actually gets granted out.
Then that's answered. We don't need to go any further. July 4th, monitoring, I'd like a full report tonight on that. Quick, just how you did it. I think it's fair to our citizens to report back broadly about how this year's action, because you have your results, Chief. Great. Item 14, that's the Orange County Marathon. I think I've heard enough from constituents. I think I want that pulled off the consent agenda for a full report. And that's it. City Clerk?
Item number 2, Junior Lifeguard Program.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. Tim Riley, Fire Chief. We're back. In April, we came before you as a result of some interesting developments in our Junior Lifeguard Program. I'll give you a brief recap of what happened, what we were charged with doing over the course of the summer, and the results of our work and our recommendations back to the Council. As a reminder, back in April, we came before the City Council because we had closed registration for the Junior Lifeguard Program, having already exceeded the number of it's frozen.
It's a built-in governor to keep you from talking so fast.
Okay, I'll take you through it without the PowerPoint presentation, but fortunately, we wrote a staff report that has the majority of this information available for you. It's also available to the public. Generally speaking, back in April, we came before you with a unique problem. We have a program that is so popular that we exceeded the maximum number of people that we felt it was safe to operate a program. We have a number set at 1,200 maximum participants, and after the first part of our registration process, we had 1,207 Newport Beach residents who had applied to participate in the program, and an additional 300-plus who had gone through the swim test who were not Newport Beach residents. Since we had already exceeded the maximum capacity we had established for the program and had staffed the program out for, we canceled the remainder of the enrollment, and we didn't put together a waiting list like we have in the past because we really had already exceeded the amount, and we felt there was no reason to give people false hope of creating a registration process that really wouldn't result in people being able to come into the program. As a reminder, every single Newport Beach resident that applied or met the Newport Beach resident status got in the program this year. All those that did not meet that status did not get in the program. And as you know, it created somewhat of a furor in the community about the people outside of Newport Beach being locked out, that we have a program that has been so popular, and now we can't accommodate everybody that wants to be in the program. The main issue that really came about was whether or not we wanted to expand the program to accommodate mostly non-Newport Beach residents. And just to let you know that this didn't just kind of it's kind of just snuck up on us. 2 years ago, when we did registration, we had 216 slots that were available for non-Newport Beach residents. Last year, that number dropped down to 185, and this year, instantaneously, it went to 0. So it we already knew that we were going to have to look at some issues about how we might be able to expand the program to accommodate additional people, but we didn't think it was going to happen this year.
Chief, let me stop you right there. Is there ever a question in your mind about that dramatic drop versus your verifying who is really a Newport Beach resident? Or is that ever an issue, or do you think that's not an issue?
Well, as far as
Renee's shaking her head, so it's probably not an issue.
As far as
Somebody's, smooching on their documentation and getting in, because that's a dramatic drop when it's been relatively...
Well, I think that we had a couple things occur. One, I think that we finally got full recognition by the Newport Coast and the Santa Ana Heights folks that they're part of the city and they get to be involved in the program. So I think we had a kind of a large influx due to that. As far as registration is concerned, I think that people may be starting to learn the system a little bit after, since 1984. However, I think we do a remarkable job of requiring people to prove residency requirements. We already require 3 pieces of identification with their number.
That's not an issue. We can move on. It's
Right.
fine.
So I don't think it's a huge issue. It may be a small issue, but not a huge issue. We're going to talk about it a little bit later. Anyway, in 1984, we had 50 people. Last year, we had 1,207. So there's no doubt this has grown into be an incredible, incredible program. Just to give you an idea, we had what we felt was over 1,300 people who had passed the swim test that wanted to get in last year. And I mean, that could have applied this year. We had over 1,500 that passed the swim test. So we could have had as many as 300 that did not get in last year. Now, as we mentioned back then, we think that the junior lifeguard program is successful and popular for a couple reasons. One is that it's a great safety program. Our main goal is to teach people to be ocean and water safe, and that's why we stress throughout the program safety, safety, safety. And I think that the results are people who go through our program are pretty water safe after they've been through our program. I think the second reason it's so popular is that it's such a high-quality program, and it's really every single minute of the day I can just do a tip of the cap to Renee Boyer because she has put together the most remarkable program that really is known throughout this nation as one of the premier programs to be run. Right now, the way the program works, it's currently an 8-week summer program. A week consists of Monday through Thursday, so it's only 4 days. People who want to register are required to pass a swim test, and we have particular standards they have to pass the test in. They can either get into a morning session that runs from 9 till noon, or get into an afternoon session that runs from 1 to 4. So generally it's 4 hours, 4 days a week as part of it. It meets on the south side of the Balboa Pier. Participants are aged 9 through 15. As I mentioned, we stress ocean safety. We also stress good citizenship. All of our instructors are Newport Beach ocean lifeguards. They've been through our basic lifeguard academy. They spend a couple years at least on the beach before they can apply and be accepted to be an instructor in the junior lifeguard program. One of the highest issues of being accepted into as an instructor of the program is quality of character. We feel that we have an opportunity to make significant impressions on young people's lives, and we take that responsibility very seriously. So our instructors are really the key to make this program as successful as it is. Originally, we established a maximum program enrollment of 1,000 people back in 1997 was when we reached that cap. And that 1,000 people was really based upon the maximum number of instructors we had, the maximum number we felt we could put into our events, and safely monitor those people. And so in 1997, we already kind of made a decision to increase the number of participants to 1,200. And so in 1998 to 2005, we pushed it up to 1,200 participants, and that's the cap that we have. As I mentioned before, last year we had about 300 people that wanted to participate that were not under that 1,200 participant cap. When we were here in April, we said we're going to take this summer, we're going to take a look at what's going on, and we'll also do some research of other programs around. We'll look at a lot of different options, and we will come back with you with recommendations on where we think we should go with our program. At the time, we said some of the options we may look at is keep it just the way it is. 1,200 max participation. Newport Beach residents get Newport Beach citizens get priority registration. Once we fill it up, and that's the way it goes. Increase the number of participants we have in our current program, so increase the cap from 1,200 to, say, 1,500. Allow private programs to run through the Recreation Department to supplement our program, which we immediately threw out as not a good safety idea. Break the program into two pieces, one at one location on the beach, one at another location on the beach, and then look at other options. And we actually did look up and down the state at other programs to get an idea of what we should do. With that kind of direction from the City Council, I sat down with Rini and I said, okay, let's set up some clear guidance on how we're going to look at where we're going to go with the programs in the future. And the number one priority was safety again. Make sure that we have a manageable number of participants with good quality instructors to make sure everybody who participates is safe in this environment. The second was keep the quality of the program. That's what's made it from a 50-person program to a 1,200-person program, is the great quality it has, which is good content, clear, it's consistent, it's achievable, it's very popular. We have the excellent role models in what we think are the highest caliber lifeguards as our instructors. And then the third goal to look at what the program options were was, what are the ways we can increase the number of participants to meet the demand? What I'd like to do now, since Rini did all the work on doing the research, is turn this over to Rini and let her talk to you about how we reviewed what the options are and the things that we looked at, and take you through where we think we are today with the recommendation for your consideration. So here's Rini Boyer.
Thank you, Chief. And that was an excellent summary of just where we stand today. You're very welcome. And I just want to say that the last 6 months since I was here before was basically just a big junior lifeguard think tank. So I appreciate all the suggestions we got for future program goals from many of you, many of the audience out there. Some of them were solicited, some of them unsolicited, but I actually kept a file of all the ideas we had the last 6 months. And I guess I sometimes have to just remind myself to smile, and you can smile too because it's your program, so we're here because of our success. And as the Chief said, we promised some ideas, so here we go, and I think this will be a new chapter in the junior lifeguard world. We had to really consider what we needed to look at for the future of junior lifeguards, and I broke it down to 9 essential items that I think contribute to the quality of our program and the safety of our program. Number 1 is junior lifeguard safety, and that's to assure every junior lifeguard is safe in our ocean environment. Number 2 is the program quality. That's the product we give our consumer. Number 3 is our instructor quality. And again, those instructors have to be excellent role models and have the highest character. We have approximately 200 seasonal ocean lifeguards. About 130 of them have a schedule. A third of those are assigned to our junior lifeguard program. We also had to look, number 4, at our maximum number of participants. And that's not, it's also included Newport residents as the priority there, not just non-residents. Newport residents is our priority. Travel safety to and from junior lifeguards. I've had this conversation with some of the council people up there that the impact on the area of Balboa is a little bit crazy at times in the summer. So that has to be an essential component, that we're keeping those junior lifeguards traveling to and from the Balboa Pier area safe. We have to also look at the cost of the program. We have to look at parking. It is an essential component of our program that there's some place for the parents to park, or at least a possibility of it. Our customer service. The fire department is safety, service, and professionalism. we have to make sure that we're able to service the number of customers that we have and the community needs of our community. So those were our 9 essential components we looked at. After looking at numerous ideas for the future of junior lifeguards, we came down to 4 best future program ideas. And they're all really just modifying our existing program that we have. And we had to evaluate what we get and what we lose with each of these. So our 4 best ideas for the future were, number 1, to stay just the same. An 8-week program at the Balboa Pier with 700 junior lifeguards in the morning, 500 junior lifeguards in the afternoon. Number 2, to keep the same 8-week program and try to increase to 1,500 students. That would be approximately 750 in the morning group, approximately 750 in the afternoon group at the Balboa Pier. Number 3 program option. We looked at having 1 8-week program at 2 satellite locations. That was my best idea last spring until I really tried to put that down on paper and find out how many people it took to do that. So it kind of turned out to an impossibility. But that's still there, a satellite program where the first location would be at the Balboa Pier, the second location I'm not sure. We would still have a morning and an afternoon group. The 4th best program idea we came up with was to actually have 2 4-week junior lifeguard programs, and that would take up the 8 weeks of summer vacation for the school children. We would have a maximum number of 1,000 participants in the first session, 1,000 in the second session, which comes to a maximum of 2,000 participants. Like I said, there were many other program ideas, but those were our 4 best that we had.
Renee,
Yes.
if you had 2 4-week sessions, would it be 4 or 5 days a week?
What we would do, I have a sample calendar that I'll verbally present to you a little later. Of the 4 weeks, we would use 2 of the Fridays.
Okay.
So what we did then is we took our 9 essential program components and we took our 4 best options and we actually ranked those. I sent a survey out to 20 people that I value their opinion. Some of them were parents of junior lifeguards currently, some were past parents, some were instructors, some were coordinators at other programs, but people I really think that would help us for our future. And then I took their mean score, and basically the 2 4-week program double outranked anything else. When we look at the safety component as first, the quality of the program, and the instructor quality. Ranked second was our 1 8-week program, staying the same, and we all know that that didn't really accommodate our community needs. When we look at increasing to 1,500, myself and my survey said that the quality of our program really goes down when we look at adding about 10 more instructors of our pool of limited supply of instructors. And I think that that, along with safety, is just one of the essential components that we have. And then ranked last was our satellite program, and again, that really, the quality and the number of instructors it takes to run that program and the cost increasing drastically because of needs of equipment at 2 locations. So again, our 9 essential components ranked with our program options. Our number 1 top idea is the 2 4-week junior lifeguard session. So as I recommend that program, I can assure you that this will meet the goal to keep the safety of our program for the participants. It will also keep the quality of the program. And it also meets the needs of our community for increased participation. And again, I stress, we got all our Newport Beach residents in that registered on time. I would estimate that there were 50 to 100 of Newport residents that forgot to register that we had to deny participation. And in talking to the school districts, the enrollment is still increasing, so I don't see our enrollment diminishing. So I think we do have to at the time is now to look to the future. I have been asked, and recently by Mr. Ridgway, about the loss of class time. We're suggesting to go from an 8-week program to a 4-week program. Our initial 8-week program that we have right now, our first week of that program is actually just getting to know the junior lifeguards and putting them in groups. The last week of the program is only 2 days long. The new idea of the 2 4-week programs, we would put junior lifeguards in their class automatically the first day of class based on their swimming times. So we would eliminate that first week of testing, which we don't really cover a lot of class content right now. So we would be going from 24 days of instruction, not counting that first week, to 17 days of instruction. If you count the first week, it would be going from 28 days of instruction to 17 days of instruction. So I would be remiss by saying we might lose some content, but considering the overall quality of the program and the quality of our instructors and the safety of the participants is our primary goal here, that we get to keep that, having 2 4-week programs. I'd also like to add that since we started in 1984, there is a shorter school vacation time because ski week's been added in, and some student instruction days for teachers. So it used to be that summer vacation was maybe 10 or 12 weeks long. Now it's really only 8 weeks to work with, and one of the comments I had from my instructors at the end of the summer was almost all the students missed at least a week. And so that was one of their critiques of the program. How could we get full-time participation? So that's one of the reasons we came up with this 2 4-week program idea. Additional advantage, as I said, shorter summer vacation time so families could actually plan a vacation. And then remember that we would also be enhancing beach operations because the 2 4-week program would take fewer seasonal ocean lifeguards to actually administer, and there would be more seasonal beach lifeguards than to keep our 8 to 9 million beach visitors safe. The junior lifeguard calendar, considering the 2 4-week sessions, would be session number 1 would start in 2006 on June 26th and go to July 21st. And again, the morning 9 to 12 or the afternoon 1 to 4. Session number 2 would be from July 24th until August 16th. Classes would meet Monday through Thursday 2 of the 4 weeks, and Monday through Friday the other 2 4-week sessions. Both sessions would have some of our infamous events like the hot dog dinner, the Monster Mile, graduation, and a group picture. Junior lifeguard participants, if they're in the first session, would have a chance to go to regionals. If they're in the second session, they'd have a chance to go to what we call our Santa Barbara Fiesta. Whether they participated in the first session or the second session, they would have the opportunity to compete in our national competition or the Gray Lundy Ironman. So the details of the calendar have been worked out, and the class content stays the same. Although, remember, we are totally reliant on what the surf conditions are. So if we happen to have a summer red flag surf, it diminishes what we can do, but that's really out of our hands, and that's part of the educational process. Now I'm going on to what our registration process would be like. It would be similar to past practice. I really think we're fairly efficient there, and participants would need to pre-pass a test, and Newport residents would get top priority. The minor changes in registration that I would suggest would be that we would request a copy of a birth certificate. There would be a 20% fee increase for non-residents, and I would suggest to have 3 attempts to pass the swim test rather than 7 attempts, and that's just to be fair to our students. After 3 attempts, if you didn't do your 100-yard swim in the time standard, not many made it after that, so I think that's just a fairness factor to the participants. So those are some minor changes that we would suggest. And I would also like to point out the registration would be, our registration numbers for the 2 4-week program would be based on how many people pass the swim test. For example, if we had 1,600 pass the swim test, we would have 800 in the first session and 800 in the second session places to register. So that's the process. Some of the frequently asked questions that I've already had, and this would be from the people, what I call my think tank, or some of you that I've seen at city events. The first question would be, can we register for both 4-week programs? My initial suggestion would be no, because there would be a duplication of class material, and then that means that we would hopefully have places to grow in the future, that we wouldn't fill all our spots the first year. The second question we've had is, why isn't the 4-week program half the cost of the 8-week program? Once we purchase our uniform items and our Monster Mile t-shirts and our Monster Mile wristbands and special events that we get for each participant, the cost of instruction is a little part of that, so it doesn't change the cost of the program that much, going from 8 weeks to 4 weeks. The third question I've received a little bit is, if only Newport Beach residents were permitted to participate, would we accommodate all of them and be able to keep the 8-week program? Since I've checked into school enrollment, that's increasing. We now have Newport Coast, Santa Ana Heights. My feeling is that we're past that 1,200 maximum number that we have now for safety. So this concept isn't only to accommodate non-residents, it's to accommodate all our Newport Beach residents first. The next question that I've received is, would a permanent junior lifeguard facility at the Balboa Pier help to accommodate additional participants? It would be awesome. And I think it would give us a kind of marker of what we've done for the community and a place in the community. It would also provide an extra safety factor for our participants, because it would be very nice to have running water. But it doesn't solve our problem of the stress that more than 1,200 at once would have on the Balboa Pier community. The impact there wouldn't change, and that's the number of bicycles we have, the number of people we have on the boardwalk, the number of parents we have driving into the parking lot to drop off their junior lifeguards. If some of you have had a chance to see the new junior lifeguard facility at our sister city in Huntington Beach, it's awesome. So I'd be happy to look into that, but I don't want to give you false hope that that changes the number of students we can accommodate at once. And the last question I've received would be, will the class content, what we teach, be cut in half, going from an 8-week program to a 4-week program? I truly don't think so, because remember that first week is just testing students for class selection, and the last week of our 8-week program was only 2 days. So we've mapped it out that we can finish our junior lifeguard notebook in 4 weeks if we have a good summer with nice surf. I'd like to just, again, thank you and remind you that our youth are our key to our future here, and I know you're all well aware of that, because some of you have had participants in our program. And the city of Newport Beach, we all know that the ocean environment is one of the factors that makes it so unique and wonderful to live here. And I would estimate in the last 22 years that we have had the opportunity to probably educate about 20,000 young adults about ocean safety, and hopefully they've shared that information with their parents and their family, and it's made us a beach-aware, ocean-safe community. And I truly hope that this idea of 2 4-week junior lifeguard sessions is embraced by you and our community, and we're able to continue to educate the youth of today and to be good citizens of tomorrow. So thank you very much, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I'll bring it back to council. Delich?
What is the difference in the number of hours between the two programs?
I didn't break it down by hours. I can tell you by days, it was 17 days versus 24 days. And there's 3 hours per session. So 17 times 3 or 24 times 3.
Well, Rini, question on that. In the 4-week program, are you cutting the last week to 2 days, or is it going to be 4 days?
Because the first session has 4th of July holiday, it would be actually 5 days, 4 days, the first 4-week session, and it would be, 5 days the first 4-week session and 4 days the second 4-week session. So we could have equal amount of instruction in the first, second session and second session.
So, but the 4th week will not be a 2-day week, it'll be a 4-day week.
Correct.
Okay, so that you're gaining there. One comment, well, I actually have quite a few comments. For those at council and in the audience, my daughter was in the program this summer, as Rini knows. I live on the peninsula, and for years I've watched all the bicyclists and the parents. One comment regarding the drop-off, which I've watched. I think a couple years ago when we rebuilt the Balboa parking lot and we created a pass-through for the A lot, that helped immensely. I mean, it dead-ended, as you know, it was a nightmare prior to that. People were dropping their kids off on the boulevard, they were walking in. So if there's a way to improve that, I'd ask you to look at that. In other words, where the trailer is, maybe there's a way to create something there. And I'm going to get to the trailer in a second. Secondly, because all the kids in the neighborhood, as you know, I live right by the elementary school, and so we're kind of party central. And I can tell you 4 times for passing the test would be a minimum. I say that because, as you know, Rini, they all take classes in the dead of winter when it's cold and rainy, and everybody is going to those classes, and they are trying hard to get their times down. And, you know, parents are helping the instruction. So I think that to limit it to 3 times is really unfair to the kids who are really working hard during those winter months. And for those of you who don't know, the kids, the school district puts on a program at both the swimming pools at nighttime. It's cold, by the way. It's absolutely freezing. It's raining, but those classes go on. So anyhow, that would be a suggestion. I like the 2-session idea for the very reason you started off with. We had to adjust our entire summer for the 8-week program, and we didn't do our vacation until right before school started. That was very difficult, by the way, and there were a number of families that had that. So the 2-session concept really helps everybody. As you know, people are going there not just from the public schools, but from all the private and parochial schools. So everybody has a different time frame. This creates a tremendous flexibility for families, quite candidly, and I think you won't have as much absences. My last comment has to do with the facility. I have resisted as a councilman for a few years a permanent facility at the Balboa Pier. And in the last couple of years, and my boys did not attend, I couldn't get them to do it. Don't ask me why, but my daughter did it. And seeing the situation at the pier, I do agree with your comments in here that it gives you certainly a sense of place. It validates the overall program, and quite candidly, I think we could use a facility there year-round, not just summer. I think it, as long as it's, I don't know what size you would propose. I don't know how we would fund it, but I think, from my perspective as a city councilman, I'd like to see that brought back. But again, with the added component for some type of turnaround or something to help the cars, or to pull over as you know right now, they're just stopping there at that corner and dropping kids off, and people try to go around. So there's got to be a way, one way or the other, to create a little bit more safety on pulling them or dropping the kids off. But I do, at this point in time, under the right circumstances, I think a permanent facility should be studied further without fail. Again, we've become, when I was here 7 years ago, we were nowhere near the enrollment we are now. And I've been in the trailers there. It's a shame.
Well, as you know also that we receive quite an occasional phone call or two when it's not off of the beach right after the junior guard program's over as well. So there's definitely some community input on that particular issue that we'd have to deal with. Clearly, the movement of the trailer in, the trailer out, the setup, the takedown, to pack everything up, to unpack it, to store it, to unstore it, a lot of extra staff time, a lot of extra work. Having a permanent facility would really grease the whole program a lot nicer. Doesn't address the issue of participation, as you mentioned.
No, I understand it. It's a separate
clearly,
issue.
we would love to engage in further discussions along that.
Well, I'd like for a future study session to come back with that and maybe a siting. I think the issue, Tim, is siting as much as anything, although I know where the current trailers are. But I think the overall community really would benefit from a building there, not just summertime, but year-round. But that's a whole separate issue. I'm just trying, let's concentrate here on the junior guard program, which, again, we're not the only city on the coast that has it, and every city has indeed grown exponentially. And being part of the public school programs, yes, enrollment is up substantially, as is birth rate. So, I mean, that's one goes with the other.
Councilman Daigle?
Sure. I know when I hear Councilman Ridgway talk about summer vacation, I have out-of-town guests come to Newport Beach. They always ask me, where are Newport Beach people go on vacation? It's so beautiful here. Anyhow, I also would like to learn more about a community education center, what Huntington Beach is doing, and what some options here. Certainly improvements that focus on enhancing coastal access and those types of things make a lot of sense. So whether it's at a future study session, I know we're also looking at a public facilities survey or study and really learning from your perspective how this type of facility would fit into all that.
Great.
Mr. Webb?
I'd like to compliment you on the literally thousands of people that have been educated in ocean safety. I don't know that we can really look at statistics, but both of my sons, didn't go through the entire program because they were both in that early years, but one of them continues to surf, and the other one is very water-oriented, and in listening to them to talk when we're with their families, you can hear some of the things that they learn being taught to their children. So I think it's a wonderful program, and I believe that since I like my vacations, the 2 4-week sessions, it sounds like it could be easier for the families to work into their programs, and you still be able to accomplish what you need to accomplish. So that would be what I would like to support.
Anybody else?
I just got another question. Based on those numbers, it looks like we're losing 21 hours out of the existing program, and if you take 12 hours of that being the first week qualification, it means there's a net 9 hours lost of something. What's being lost in that 9 hours, and how are you making it up? If you are.
Well, let me first state that I don't think we're trying to make it up. I think what we're trying to do is retool a program that still meets all of our goals of ocean safety, quality participation, keep the events that are successful and exciting for the kids, keep those involved. To think that we're going to take 8 weeks, put it into 4 weeks, and keep everything the same, I don't think is realistic. So really the focus would be on rewriting a curriculum that gets our basic ocean safety, ocean survival messages out to our participants. That's the focus of the program. So
do you think
we
that's
will
going
be
to be
losing.
like 9 hours out of that you're not going to get in the water, or 9 hours on the beach instruction?
Well, it's a little bit of both. Pretty much the way we do, we have a workbook, And the workbook takes us from start to finish, what we think you need to know about the ocean environment and the beach environment, and then water safety and first aid and a whole bunch of things. And that notebook needs to be completed at the end of the summer. Well, with extra time in the program during an 8-week program, sometimes we focus on it, sometimes we focus on other events, other fun things to do. It gives the instructors a little more liberty to say, hey, we're going to go do this activity today instead of that activity. Well, that will change a little bit. Now we'll actually focus on these items being in a curriculum that we need to get completed. So as Rini said, with the calendar staffed out and the idea of how she would develop the group that people are in early in the program, it's still our intent to complete that workbook, which in essence is the curriculum. The way it works today pretty much is, the participants show up, they goof around until the exact hour where we're supposed to start, then they get into a big group, we have an overall discussion, they break into their smaller groups with the instructors, they either do a group activity at that time or they work in their workbooks, and then they go and do certain types of physical activities, whether it's a swim, whether it's a run, whether it's another type of activity. On occasion, mostly on Thursdays, we have competition days where they all participate in one big group, and that would not change. But generally speaking, it allows them a little bit of, think about, kids in school. They just can't sit in a desk for not 3 hours straight. So we look at ways to mix that up with kind of classroom and participation and actual ocean safety activities. So it's a real mix of things. The focus still would be on completing the curriculum.
Ed, my thought is they'll become more military.
Which is pretty tough for those lifeguards.
No, I just want to say, I think it's a great program, too. Both my kids went through it, and I know as a parent, I had a lot more confidence that they were safe, particularly as they started getting older and running off and doing their own thing. You knew that they're hanging around the beach, and they had good training. So I appreciate all the work you guys do on that.
And that's really the ultimate goal right there, what you said, is they can come to the beach and be safe, and you don't have to worry about them. The other thing I might add, just one last thing, is when we talk about the instructors, this shorter summertime of only 8 weeks, and it kind of fluxing on both ends depending on what school you go to, and it really impacts our ability to have lifeguards in the summertime because most of them are either high school kids or college kids who come back in the summer and work for us, or they have completed their college education and become teachers and come back and work for us during the summertime. So the ability to keep instructors around, along with all the rest of the ocean lifeguards we have on the beach, is getting more difficult because of this flux all the time. So this program actually benefits us in the regard of having more people to choose from because we have a lesser number of instructors, which increases the likelihood we'll have more people to choose from to staff the beaches. So that also helps us a lot.
Anybody else? Mr. Nichols?
My kids have participated, and they enjoyed it.
Thanks.
And they were winners.
My boys said they participated. They jumping out of boats and off piers, but I assume they did. They weren't just catting around the pavilion. My question is, what about the other pier? Since one of the issues is all that traffic going down the peninsula, what about putting it at the Newport Pier versus the Balboa Pier? I have no reason to say that one over the other, but has that question been asked and answered?
Well, it's been asked and answered by us. I don't know if we've given that information to you. When you look at the two different environments, the Balboa Pier has it over Newport Pier, hands down. First off, much more.
No, I don't need. I mean, if you as the boss say
absolutely
keep it.
Absolutely,
Rini is saying
much better
that's
environment.
it. Fine, that's
much
answered.
better environment.
Yeah,
particularly the fact that it's very close to the ferry, where a lot of kids come across the
right.
ferry,
No,
transport-wise.
You've won this one. That's fine.
It's the way.
Well, you fed into a pet project of mine. I asked for a parking structure at the Newport Pier, and obviously parking is extremely constrained at the Newport Pier. It just wouldn't work, and the beach is very small to me.
Also, the environment around the Newport Pier, as far as the adult entertainment establishments, doesn't really mix as well as down in Balboa. With the
My kids like Blackies.
So I like Blackies too, but I don't want to send my junior guards there.
Just your lifeguards. Okay, no, okay.
Off after hours.
Any
when
other
they're of age.
Any other comments here?
Are there any problems with regard to the water, too? Is it a little bit safer at Balboa?
No, actually, it's a little bit more challenging at Balboa, which increases the education they get. I mean, if they can be beach trained and ocean trained in Balboa, they can go just about anywhere in Newport Beach.
But
I
the only,
kind of wondered about the diving in from the pier, whether it would be
Yeah.
safer or the other way
No
around.
no change on that activity, but the rest of the environment's,
the only issue I know for my kids and you guys this summer, we had a lot of red tide, which was really unfortunate. They hated the red tide.
so did we.
Okay? All right, close it, and open to public comment. Come on down. Good report, Chief. It's hard to cut you off. You answer questions very well.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Louise Funnenberg. I applaud the program greatly. I would like to see them add one thing to their curriculum, if they haven't already, is the fact that these youngsters who are coming on bicycles are driving vehicles. And they have some idea in their small minds that if they just come to the crosswalk and bail out into it, they will be perfectly safe. The problem is they have not guessed or thought the momentum of a car and the stopping time needed. So I think we need a little public education on getting to our junior lifeguard program, because many of these kids are not riding safely down the peninsula, even down our alleys, and this makes a problem for little old ladies in cars. Thank you.
Actually, I'm going to support that, and Rini and Tim, Chief, I want you to spend, I know you do, but again, a little bit of time with education and bicycles. I know we had 3 girls that came to our house every day, and we took turns having the parents take them across the boulevard for 2 weeks. So legitimate comment, since I see them going and coming constantly.
I think that one of the things that you keep just talking about the peninsula area, but it's really interesting to see all the uniforms that come down Dover Drive and go underneath the bridge there and down Bayside Drive in front of Ed's house every day, and you actually see them really all over the community. So I think that perhaps a 1 or 2 hour session on bicycle safety is probably included in your program, right? So that's an important item.
Yeah, obviously it is. And the other comment, though, and this one's inconsistent with that policy, and that is bicyclists are not supposed to be riding on the sidewalks, and obviously all those kids are, and I would encourage them to, by the way. I just want to say, so sometimes I think our ordinances are anti-safety, and in this case, it's very true.
Final comment, since I've had about 6 of them in my garage, broken helmets. I think a push-up or 2, if you don't have a helmet, might reinforce that as well when they come by bike. Keep that egg on their head a little safer. It's great. All right, public comment is still open. You want to address junior lifeguard? Okay, we're going to cut it off. All right. Thank you, Rini. Thank you, Chief. Tim? Oh, yes. No. Okay, let's bring it back. Homer, what do you need from us?
Don't need anything.
Well, you need an action item, right?
No.
We don't need any action. We'll come back at a later date with probably some budget decisions for you to make, so we can start up the program.
Well, then, and when do they need an answer from us?
We'll come back when they do.
I think we have our direction. One of the things we have to do now is revise the registration fee, bring that back to the council, because that is a councilmanic decision on establishing fees. So that'll be really the direction that we come back with, is to get that done. But I think that we're prepared to move forward. I think we have what we need.
And Chief, I would ask you to dust off your old files about, I know when I started here 7 years ago, there was actually a staff report about a permanent facility. I think it's time to revisit that.
I have that. I can recycle that report pretty easy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. City Clerk?
Item number 3, general plan update, review draft goals and policies for the natural resources element.
Who's giving the report?
Sharon is going to lead us on.
Thank you.
Before Sharon starts, Mr. Mayor, I have a question. I've been handed 2 documents that says received after agenda printed, but I did have copies in my file. Are these different than what was in my report?
These show the changes in color that were made by the General
Planning.
Plan Advisory Committee and by the Planning Commission. Greg, can you tell us which color is which? There's purple and blue, or pink and blue.
Okay. Blue is the GPAC, purple is the Planning Commission.
Okay.
So this afternoon, we're continuing our review of the draft policies for the updated general plan. We have two elements for today. The first is natural resources, and the second is recreation. The natural resources, both of these, by the way, are required elements of the general plan, so there won't be a need for that threshold discussion this time. The natural resources element is a complete redo, a fresh start from the existing element, which was adopted in 1974. The existing natural resources element is one that's an original and never been amended. It does cover quite a few of the topics that are covered in this new element, but not nearly with the level of detail or sophistication, and there are also additional topics in the proposed new element. Another thing that we have done, looking at both of today's elements, is relocated some policies. The current recreation element is recreation and open space, and what we have done in these proposed elements is move the open space policies from recreation into natural resources so that it's really just a recreation element that focuses on those issues alone. So with that, I think we can begin with natural resources, and once again, we'll have Woody Tesher kind of lead you through.
Okay.
What are we going to have, a slide, just walk through it, walk it, talk it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, well, before Woody gets started, I just want to make one comment. I've made this numerous times, and on the introduction, paragraph 1, and you talk about water quality, and I would love for us to put in there, you know, an added line that says bay and ocean quality, water quality, and potable drinking water quality, just in the introduction, because you get rolling into the document, and for me, I'm on the Coastal Bay Water Quality Committee, and I'm thinking, okay, now what am I talking about? Potable water, or somehow some clarification in the very first paragraph. So when people get into the document, that you know, you'll have a better feel for what you mean by water quality. And in this case, it's both. But it just maybe I know too much, and I get confused very quickly. So that's the only comment on the introduction.
Really, as you look at it, water supply is potable water, and then water quality is the other runoff types, and so that it does make sense to separate the two.
Yeah, it's there's a way to do that. That's my only request.
Good. Anything else?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Again, we'll follow the format that we have in our prior meetings. We decided not to go with the PowerPoint today because all it does is list the goal, which is in your text anyway. So we thought it would be easier to sort of expedite items rather than turning the lights on and off to take a look at it in that direction. Let me start on page, unless there are any additional comments on the back. Why don't we entertain comments on the background information first and then move into the goals and policies if that's the discretion of the council? We'd be happy to do that.
I mean, we can go page by page, however you want,
Okay.
but I have a comment on page 1 again.
Okay. Please.
In your third paragraph, under water supply, and it talks about local projects, conservation, additional water transfers. I don't know if it's appropriate here, but, and in the entire document itself, there is no mention of GWRS, the groundwater replenishment system that is being built as a demonstration project, the largest in the nation, between the Orange County Water District and the Orange County Sanitation District. All you have to do is say groundwater replenishment system. I think by the time this thing gets published, everybody in this community will know what it is, but it is nowhere to be found in the document. And it will create about 70 million gallons of fresh water per day to our
sources.
Wells out there.
Also in that paragraph, it kind of indicates that our water supplies are going to be adequate until the year 2010, and then something happens to where they're not adequate anymore.
Full supply.
Right. So I think that you really need to maybe talk that over with your utilities department and get some of their thoughts on it, because I believe that we can be sure of water supplies much beyond 2010.
Actually, that's something we talk about all the time at sanitation district. So we are covered, and so that's an improper comment, especially in light of GWRS, especially in light of it, because we're going to be recharging our groundwater basin consistently with that water.
There's a much bigger source, and that is the migration that we put on the Santa Ana River water. And I think, my question is I don't think you can philosophically handle all those discussions on just a paragraph. And I'm wondering whether stating this, we're going to be contradicting ourselves later on.
Well, I understand your comment. I guess Don is suggesting that comment regarding 2010, it probably should be deleted, if you want my opinion, but...
Well, I think he's talking about loss of Colorado River water, which is definitely...
I'm not talking about that. I think that the planning processes that are out there in the water industry are such that they feel that the facilities that are under construction and under consideration at the time will be able to take us beyond 2010, significantly beyond it. And this doesn't really, I think, reflect what the actual system is, and I think that your utilities people can give you a little bit better idea of what the wording should be on that.
I had a couple questions. On the second paragraph, it talks about a commitment to sustainable development within the introduction.
Okay.
Second paragraph of the introduction. This whole field of study with certain principles and so on and so forth, how does this document really reflect what, some people view or what is sustainable development? Maybe you can explain sustainable development to us.
In general, sustainable development is a basic direction that is to reduce consumption of non-renewable resources. Water, air is, when you have pollution, is considered non-renewable. Energy is a non-renewable resource. You can go through the list. Throughout this document, you will see policies, and there are specific policies in here dealing with energy conservation, with water conservation, et cetera. So we have developed that as a theme. As you do go through the policies, you will see woven into the basic principles of sustainability. And sustainability, to just also articulate, because we've done quite a bit of work on that, is an area that's not only the, if you will, what I call the hard systems of the fixtures, for example, in buildings. And there is a program for certification of building design, for example, called LEEDS, which is a system where you actually score points to indeed, and that you'll see reflected in the policies, to reduce heat gain, heat loss, and hence the use of the non-renewable resources. But there are other strategies that also get you to that. For example, some of the land use policies that we have been talking about, where we begin to look at reduction of automobile trips through the intermixing of uses, are also strategies that reduces the consumption of gasoline, which reduces the air pollution, reduces the noise, and is also considered a sustainable strategy as well. So it's the whole mix. We've actually been discussing that up front in the general plan, sort of the intro, when we talk about the vision of the Newport Beach general plan. We're talking about the possibility of weaving through a theme throughout all of the elements, be it not just this element, but also be it through land use, through circulation element policies as we get to it, et cetera, that it's a common community theme on sustainability, as an overarching, if you will, theme
Okay. And then also, speaking of air quality, many residents, and they're becoming more vocal now because we have a project at Corona Del Mar State Beach, really don't like these fire rings. They're magnets for trash, for broken bottles. They're smoky. They spew pollutants. Where is AQMD on these fire rings? Have they, I know you make your way up and down the coast, have they made any sorts of reports or anything on these?
I'm not familiar with anything specifically they're doing now. We can do the research and check with AQMD. Let me just indicate that that falls into the category of, and there was a policy in here which you'll see some discussion by the Commission as well as the GPAC on gasoline mower, leaf blowers, et cetera, from the energy standpoint. How I categorize this is a category of what AQMD sees as contributors to degraded air, but there are also lifestyle issues associated with that. And for example, at one point in time, AQMD considered placing limits on backyard barbecues, on charcoal grills, on gas grills, et cetera. That created what I would consider to be a rebellion of the Southern California folks, et cetera, that basically commented about lifestyle. I think the beach rings probably would fall into the same category of issues associated with that, and I think the AQMD has backed away to a certain extent from that, but we can do some research to see where they do stand on that particular issue.
Because there may be some lifestyle issues associated with those fire rings.
Well, the beach recreational amenities.
Well, I meant from the resident standpoint.
Exactly, that as well. We'll do some research on that, where they may stand on that. Indeed, it is an issue out there. It does have an impact upon air quality, and to some extent, if you're familiar with some ski resorts in Colorado, ban wood burning in the winter because of the very same air pollution issues. So recognizing the air pollution consequences of that as well.
Thank you.
I have a comment on that. We've made our air pollution goals for the last 5 years. We haven't even had a smog warning. And to overly dwell on some of this doesn't seem to be very reasonable. We need to get back to having some productive infrastructure in our communities where we actually have manufacturing and some of these things that can be done cleanly. But if we get overly tied up in this, we're going to have an economy that will come to a total stop instead of just slowly grinding that way. And there's no, a lot of the air pollution policies are total overkill. And then, like you say, why don't we handle something called perfume? 20% of the total pollution in the air is supposed to be coming from perfume. I mean, we ought to consider the things that are real.
Back away from.
Are you contributing to that?
Are we ready to move to policies, or were there more things in the background section?
Any other comment, Mr. Selich? Anything? Good, move on. Thanks.
So moving on to the policies, beginning on page 10. The first group of policies, beginning at the top of, and we'll go as we did previously, we'll just cite the go and for your input regarding the individual policies, deal with the minimization of water consumption. This goes back to the issue of sustainability through conservation techniques as well. Again, the blue text were changes made by the advisory committee, and the purple color were the ones suggested by the Planning Commission in terms of their changes.
I had a question on.
Go ahead.
Well,
Ms. Nichols, you have a specific question? You have enough input on what Mr. Nichols' question was?
I was just going to say that the policies deal with conservation measures that limit usage, such as water-efficient landscaping and irrigation, promoting water-conserving devices and practices, and exploring implementation of alternative measures and technology as they become available. I think it was the General Plan Advisory Committee who suggested adding explore the appropriateness of implementing tiered water rates, and the Planning Commission didn't think that that was appropriate because that was a decision for the city council at some time in the future.
Under your goal number NR3, where it says recharge groundwater resources, I'm not quite sure. I understand the concept. However, we don't sit over a groundwater basin that can be recharged here.
The goal is the recharge of groundwater resources. It's not for the city to do the recharging.
Actually, we do that right now through our sewage disposal facilities, which are sending water back to be recharged into our underground basin. And also the Prado Dam and Seven Oaks Dam participation that we have are very directly concerning that subject. And that brings in so much more water than we do by our reclamation procedure, and at so much less cost. We lost something like $30 million worth of water because we didn't have our Prado Dam up to snuff, and we didn't have Seven Oaks Dam up to snuff last winter. Just a huge amount of money because we needed to get those facilities fixed.
I think that particular policy might be better stated if you were to say participate in programs that encourage groundwater recharge, rather than, this kind of indicates that we have the ability to do that here, and we really don't.
Well, let me just, and maybe we're looking at the way the goal is worded, because the two policies address two issues that you do have authority over. One is how natural drainage systems are incorporated and addressed in private development, and obviously most of the cities develop it, and this in reality would pertain to probably one site, and that's at Banning Ranches in the city. The first objective about, the first policy about the incorporation of the natural drainage and the reuse of the water on site. This is also pretty much consistent with state law now. I mean, it also suggests that the state is becoming very rigorous about requiring developments to do both of these policies. One is stormwater detention on site of projects, which would apply indeed to Banning Ranch. And the second is the use of impervious surfaces. You're going to see increasing regulation at the state level in terms of both of these two particular policies, and I think both of these are pretty much consistent with the direction we're receiving from the state right now.
Right, but I think that those would more appropriately be placed under the water quality sections as opposed to under groundwater recharge, because those particular items that you just described really aren't recharging the groundwater basin. They're trying to purify the water and keep it from running off into the waters, and so that I'm not sure that it's tied into the potable water system.
It's a little bit of both, and in reality, because what happens is if you allow more water into a downstream impervious surface, if you, through this kind of technique, allow some indeed more permeable water going into a groundwater basin, even if you're not using for water, it's the balance of the hydrological basin. You're keeping the groundwater higher below that site, which then helps your upstream resources, according to my engineer folks.
I think that Don Webb is very much right there. In our particular basin, that's runoff water. There are two levels in our basin. One is the recharge basin that we use for drinking water, which is what I think you're talking about. And the second one is just drainage that goes off into the ocean. And all our subdivisions that I'm aware of have retention basins to try and clean the water that we have rain on our sprinkler systems prior to going off into the ocean. But there also is a recharge basin, and that recharge basin, a lot of our water goes to, particularly our sewer water.
Well, let me, I think Don's bringing up a good point. When you read recharge of groundwater resources, first of all, it really has to do with surface drainage and not recharge, because Don and I, as you know, our recharge basin is up in Anaheim, and water has to filtrate through the subsoils for a year or two to get to our recharge of our wells in Fountain Valley. So really what you're just talking about is runoff.
Yeah.
So
But-
we will eliminate goal NR3 and move those two policies to water quality?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. Now you're right on. And I wouldn't call it recharge of groundwater, though.
We'll eliminate
Just
the goal.
eliminate the goal.
Yeah.
We'll eliminate the goal.
It states what I said before, encourage participation in programs that support the recharge of the groundwater basin.
Well, but that's outside our city limits, but that's fine. If you want to stay with recharge of groundwater resources, then you really have to say we,
Participate in recharge.
yeah. But I'd like to step back. I stepped out of the room and no. I'm going to, because one of my members of my Harbor Bay Water Quality Committee is here, and Dave Kiff is here, and I really think it is important for us on this page 10, the white page, where the blue is the GPAC committee, explore the appropriateness of implementing tiered water rates. I have opposed that as the chairman of that committee, but I think it does warrant debate here. I know, let me make a comment. I would be remiss not to say this. Dave Kiff clearly brings it up to our committee over and over and over again. He feels, he and I have had arguments in the hallway, at the water cooler, and everywhere else about this whole concept. So, in being fair to Dave and to the larger committee, what say this body regarding implementing or supporting or creating tiered water rates? In other words, you get a lower rate for less usage, and as your usage increases, you get, I don't know if it's a geometric progression, but I think it is. It's meant to be punitive. Is that correct, Dave? Okay. So, I think that's the first real issue that we as a body need to discuss. How do you feel about tiered water rates? A lot of cities use them, and some cities don't. But this is, quite candidly, now is the time to talk about it.
Well, based on some emails that I received from Laura Curran, which I agree with, is that you're also looking at the issue of subsidy, where if they're not tiered, you have one user subsidizing another user. So I think it's worth looking at from that perspective.
That's an equal protection argument. Dave, do you want to make an argument? Why don't you stand up and make an argument for, and then we'll kind of see if we can pick you apart.
Thank you, Councilman Ridgway. I think if I could speak for the Water Quality Committee, where we've looked at other jurisdictions that have tiered water rates, they do a fairly smart thing. They analyze each residence or each business. You get a custom allocation for your spot that depends on your acreage and even your family size. Actually, it's the size of the house. And then they tier it so that, as Councilman Ridgway said, you use a certain amount, you pay a low rate for that water, and then as soon as you start to exceed that amount, you pay more and more until you get into a penalty tier. And what IRWD does, for instance, is they take all the money from the penalty tier and they reinvest it in an audit program where they go back and they'll help the people or help the person that has that high rate, and they'll work with them to try and reduce their water usage to put them back below the penalty tier. And IRWD and other agencies firmly believe that it really cuts down on wasting water, and cutting down on wasting water leads to less runoff and less problems in our bay.
Okay, Dave's made that argument. I'm going to make not a contrary market. I'm going to make an observation. Your base water usage right now is what you would get, and I guess we'd have an appeal process. That's the devil's in the detail. In my district, which is District 1, we have no grass, we have minimal landscaping, and so our water usage is way, way, way down. However, over in District 7 and 6, where they have lots of lawns and trees and hillsides, their water usage is substantially up. However, they get a base rate. I'm just putting that out there for discussion. I'm not hearing any discussion, and if nobody wants to, I'm just telling it.
Personally, I don't think we should be deciding whether we want tiered or not tiered tonight. I think that's a discussion that we'll have at some point in the future when I think Dave can make probably a better presentation and bring in a little bit more facts and figures. I think the policy here says explore the appropriateness of implementing tiered water rates. I don't think that's committing us one way or another. It's just saying that, yes, we'd like to have some more information. Personally, I don't know if that's even needs to be in our general plan. I would hope that we would have this discussion, before a year from now when we vote on this general plan. So I personally, I think it's a good idea to explore it, whether it needs to be in the general plan or not. I mean, I'd just as soon probably leave it in, but if someone wanted to leave it out, that would be fine too. But I think it definitely merits the discussion and further investigation.
Mr.
Webb?
What was the rationale of the GPAC or whoever it was that took this out? Why was it taken out?
It was the Planning Commission.
Why did the Planning Commission take it out?
They were kissing up to council.
Respecting your authority.
That's actually in the notes.
Ed, how do you feel as chairman of that committee?
I'm kissing up to the council?
No, on the concept.
Oh, on the policy. Oh, I kind of, actually, what Councilman Ridgway brought up, I think that's a very good point. I know that when I lived in Corona Del Mar, I had probably about 10,000 square feet of landscaping, and now I've probably got about 100 square feet. And so there's a big difference between the two areas and how you consume your water. So in looking at tiered water rates, I think that have to be something you have to take into consideration. But in terms of having it in the general plan, I don't have a strong feeling whether it should be in the general plan or not. I think it's something that probably is appropriate to come back and take a look at and see if there's a reasonable way to do it or not. But I don't think it has to be in the general plan, but I don't think it hurts to have it here either. So I guess I would tend to kind of go along with the GPAC recommendation and leave it in here.
So they took it out.
No, Planning Commission took it out.
Oh.
GPAC put it in, Planning Commission.
I'd say
I
I'd
think that's
support.
what tips the scale for me as
Yeah,
GPAC wants
GPAC,
it, and we
yeah.
really need to be as closely aligned with GPAC. So
All right, I have a straw vote.
We're going to kiss up to GPAC.
that's right, you got that.
We know who's running the show here.
Mr. Nichols?
I'd like to just make a comment on that, and that is there are multiple ways of handling such a thing, and one of them is the recirculation of groundwater, which there's an excess of. And we have groundwater reuse over in the IRWD and have special rates there. That doesn't use water that's being used for drinking, and it basically is not using water that's being recycled. It's using groundwater, which eventually goes out to the ocean. And I'm not exactly sure. I think the amount of Durbis that ends up in the ocean is about the same. It's a question of does it come all at once when you have a big rainstorm and it washes everything clean, or does it come a little bit at a time when you have multiple washings a little bit at a time? And generally, I think it's about the same amount, and consequently, right now, what we have is large events and massive pollution during those events, and then nobody can swim in the ocean for 3 days or 4 days or these kinds of things. And maybe we're just as well off to have the groundwater recirculate. If people can use that, it has more salt in it, and I just think there's more ways of handling any one of these items than we've talked about, and the scientific discussion is much deeper than we're going here. I'm not even sure that we should have other than a one-line comment on this, and then they should go into some depth when we handle these items. We are not in the position to do that, and I just do not think it's appropriate.
Okay, let's,
Was there a decision on the tiered water rate policy?
well, you want to, let's take a poll? Who's for it?
Leave it in.
Leave it in? Who's against it? All right, one's against? Everybody else for it?
That solidifies my vote. Keep it in.
Okay, you've got direction, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else in the first section then on water supply?
Well, it's not exactly a sprint.
Mr. Mayor.
Potable water supply?
Right, yeah, and we will make the changes suggested in terms of the NR3 one. This is dealing with water supply because it also addresses recycled water, which is intended for.
Is there any reason to limit recycled water supply? I mean, they're using recycled water.
This doesn't address that use of, it just indicates the direction and policy to continue the uses.
Right now, we're throwing it away.
Okay, so the next section beginning.
Wait, hold on, Mr. Selich has.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing, that we've got 90 minutes left to do this in, and I was just told the Planning Commission took 4 hours to go through this. And we've gotten off to a slow start here, so I'm just going to just tell the rest of the council one thing. I've gone through this and looked at all this stuff, and my comments are really going to be limited to if I found something, I have a strong question or a strong disagreement with where GPAC came from on it, but I kind of tended in my analysis, unless it was something that really was a major deal, that I went in my own mind with what the GPAC recommendations are. So just to let you know how I'm thinking.
All right, does that mean we go to closed session now, or should we? No, that's fine. But I guess what you're telling us, Mr. Selich, is that there's a rateable progression we need to keep making if we're going to get through this in an hour and a half.
Yep, that's exactly it.
All right, good.
And I think he's made a very logical and sensitive analysis, too, and I would agree with that.
Of course, this one.
All right, Woody?
Okay, let me quickly go through water quality. There are 3 basic goals, and I'll just summarize. The water quality section deals with the issues that Councilmember Webb and others have been talking about, and that's the runoff or the pollution of the water resources themselves, which is the NR4 goal and the policies addressing that. The NR5 deals with the adherence to the total maximum daily load requirements and the provisions on that.
Let me stop you.
And then the third goal deals with sanitary sewer outflows. Let me indicate one specific issue that was raised and I don't know if this will influence Councilmember Selich's opting for the planning, the GPAC over the Planning Commission. Policy number NR 5.2 on type page 12. The GPAC made a change, the specific citation there, and it shows up one other location in the policy document, refers to a specific project, the Upper Newport Bay Ecosystem Restoration Project. The one member of the advisory committee was particularly emphasized opposition to that particular project, thought a concept of a restoration of the Upper Bay was important, but indeed did it feel that the project as that project is defined with a capital letters being used is an appropriate project that individual could support. The advisory committee supported that individual's recommendation on a vote, on a split vote. The Planning Commission felt that project was some importance. I believe it is the current policy of the city, and therefore reintroduced the original language of utilizing and referring to the specific policy, and that's for policy NR 5.2.
Well, with that confusion, Mr. Selich, do you want to give us a headlight here and show us the direction here?
Boy, you're ascribing more wisdom to me
Well,
than I
no,
have.
only because... No, I'm just going to start. What does all that mean?
I have no idea.
Good, all right, you're off the hook.
Okay. Well, let me
Mr.
ask,
Ridgway?
I have a question first. Just generally, where you put, let's go to NR 4.9, Woody, for 1 second, or 4.4. You put in paren LCP. Is that what's written in our LCP?
Yes.
Okay, so that's our local coastal.
It's not word for word. We simplified the language that is in the coastal plan for purposes of the general plan. There's a lot more detail in terms of specific standards and requirements in the LCP. So we took it back up a little more globally.
And those notations are here now just for our information. We're not going to keep that in the final version of the document.
Well, wait a minute. Then let's go to that NR 5.2. I think, as it's in capital letters, quite candidly, is important. Having worked on that for 7 years and gone back to Washington, D.C. for 5 of those 7 or whatever, it is to find sustainable funding for basically silting of our back bay is critical. And whether somebody is critical of that process, that's certainly their opinion, and I respect that. But it is clearly a TMDL, which we are mandated by federal law to mitigate, and so and we know our back bay will continue to silt up. As this project that we're currently undertaking will have a 25-year lifespan. So. No, I think capital letters is quite candidly important. So I urge that we keep that. No, I have another comment on N. We're still on NR 5. Our NR 6, sanitary sewer outflows. I have a question here for staff. It says, under NR 6.2, require waste discharge permits. We don't require permits right now, do we?
Yes, we do.
For all those, we require permits, but if somebody comes in and retrofits a restaurant, are we requiring a permit?
Yes.
Yes.
I think we do, because we
Okay, then that's fine.
But if he has an old restaurant, we don't require anything, right?
Okay, that's fine. Okay, I'm fine, let's move on.
Could I ask a...
Yes, Mr. Nichols?
This particular thing, ecosystem restoration project, is these 2 large sedimentation basins. And I would like to just make a comment. I recently was talking to a very esteemed geologist in this area, and he made 2 comments. Apparently, we are both have problems with both mercury and selenium in the upper bay. And with regard to mercury, I understand that there is that's coming from the underground, and in fact, Red Mountain has, Red Hill, that street was named after some mines that at the mountains are emitting natural mercury into the creek bed, and so we have for thousands of years had natural mercury coming down that creek bed, not from industry. I also found out that it's quite possible, and although he couldn't show me the particular outcroppings, but the selenium seems to come from shale type structures, which are quite well featured in our rock structures in the surrounding areas that feed these same creeks. And it's quite possible that what we are doing by putting these deep water sedimentation basins is we are creating attractive nuisances for people to fish there, and the fish that they will get, first of all, they're going to be colored by the sedimentation that we're bringing down the creek. Secondly, they're going to be colored by the fact that there is both natural mercury and selenium in that we probably can't get cleaned up. And we may be creating a real liability for ourselves. And my suggestion is that we ought to maybe look at this as I still think a river park will get out all your sediment if you leave that above your dam across the bay, and below that consider the deep water reservoirs and navigable waters. It makes a lot more sense for the bay and for our ecological selves, and it limits our liability that could be fantastic if we poison somebody due to eating fish from the back bay.
Let me make a comment, and Dave, maybe you want to pipe in. Selenium and mercury are clearly part of our system, and it is not only at deep water, it's actually at shallow. It's everywhere, quite candidly. And as you know, selenium causes thinning of bird eggs, and it is a problem. There's not much we can do about it. I think we have to have certainly a policy. I have no problem with it. You could chase your tail on this one all day long and get nowhere, but it is...
I'm not trying to chase my tail, I'm just saying that if we make these deep water lagoons, we may be hurting ourselves, whereas if we make a shallow basin that would catch the sediment that comes from the big rainstorms, we could be creating a way to do this at a much more manageable monetary value, create a park that our actual communities can use. Right now, we're talking about not allowing anybody into these areas.
Well, let me say again, I guess we're talking about NR 5.2, the ecosystem restoration project, and I guess some people have problems with protecting the birds and the wildlife back there. I happened to walk that all day Sunday, by the way. I challenge you to go back there. And we have silting basins or sedimentation basins at IRWD, and they are shallow water, and they maintain those on an annual basis. We do need the deep water, and I don't think we're creating any liability, contingent liability. Again, it is a TMDL mandated by federal law, and quite candidly, the system that you've described, the engineers have worked on this for years and years and years and years. And I'm not going to say, and everybody I've listened to, we have to have these deep water systems, and we have to remove the sedimentation out of there, and IRWD has their sedimentation basins. Dick, if Mr. Mayor, if you want to take a vote on this matter or a direction, but I support, again, making it capital letters and quite candidly maintaining it as is.
Well, I'd like to address the city attorney. What is our liability? To the Upper Bay project, this is Mr. Nichols' question. If by dredging it, are we creating our own liability or because we're creating a fishing environment, et cetera, versus saying that this is just mandated by federal law and we're doing what we're supposed to do?
I think at this point in time within this discussion and with the facts that we have before us, I'd say no, we're not creating any liability for ourselves. I don't have any established facts that indicate that there's really any danger or any indication that what we're doing is wrong and not within state and federal guidelines and requirements. So I
believe
I don't
Mr.
see an
Kipp
issue with liability.
isn't there a limitation on fish that we're supposed to eat out of the back bay right now?
There are mercury guidelines for fish consumption up and down the coast. It's not. It is in the bay, yes, but it also applies up and down the coast.
But
where
they're higher for the bay than they are for the coast.
No, they're as I understand, they're the same consumption standards. They're pregnant women should not eat fish from taken from the bay or from offshore above a certain amount per month, because that mercury tends to be, as some of the council members discussed, it's present in the environment. It's toxic in high levels. It's necessary in low levels, just like selenium. And that's what the Newport Bay faces, that, and all of our waters along the coast face that, both from natural sources and non-natural sources.
My only question is we're looking at things that are closer to the sources coming down they're coming out of the hills and the streams is apparently where most of this is coming and has for years. And my question is it seems to me that we're still making an attractive nuisance.
I think the key would be if the fish stayed in a certain location its entire lifetime and then was caught, it would certainly have a direct exposure and direct increases in mercury based on where it stayed. But the fish who come into and out of our bay transit the bay and throughout the entire coast, so there isn't a likelihood that you would get a high mercury level fish by continuing to fish in one spot. It comes in and out of there, and there isn't a likelihood that I've seen from the regulatory agencies that they have any concern about high levels of either mercury or selenium caused by the deep sediment catch basins in the ecosystem restoration project.
All right, we've got to make some progress here. Let's take a straw vote on that topic.
I'll go with the capital letters on it.
Capital letters?
Capital
1,
letters.
2,
Capital letters.
3, 4, 5. We got one opposition, 6-1. You have direction? Good, let's move on. Thanks.
Moving on to air quality. It has basically 3 sections. In NR7, it talks about mobile sources. The NR8 policies deal with stationary sources, and the NR9 policies deal with aircraft and address aircraft. Let me indicate here is the mobile sources are, there will be additional policies, for example, on alternative modes that you will see once you get to the circulation element. We're not there yet, so this is intended to be a series of global policies, and the alternative modes, for example, discussion will be addressed in much greater length in the circulation element as well. And to sort of help you understand, going back to Councilman Selich's concern here, what I will do is identify those policies for you where there was a difference specifically, because a lot of the changes made by the Planning Commission were little wording changes. So the one substantive change that was made in this section between the GPAC and the Planning Commission was NR 8.4. The advisory committee, if you can see in their original language, wanted a policy for the city to eliminate the use of blowers by the city and discourage their use on private property. The commission felt that that was inappropriate. So that's the one substantive difference in all of these policies.
Mr. Webb?
I believe that our code has restrictions on blowers already, to a certain extent. However, as far as I'm concerned, I think that I would support leaving it in.
Did you see that the language is eliminate the use of blowers by the city?
Regulate the use, but
We already do regulate.
Does that mean the city maintenance department, or?
That's what I would think.
10 contractors.
Yes.
Would this, this doesn't seem to distinguish between electric and gas-driven, and gas-driven blowers are the ones that do the pollution, particularly if your electric is not from a source that's portable. And
They both
Robin,
create
it's under the
substantial
noise
pollution.
restrictions.
I didn't understand, guys. Go ahead.
Hold on. Mr. Selich, you want to weigh in on this?
Well, I hate to, I didn't pick that one up in my list of things, and I hate to go against what GPAC said on this, but I think maybe this is a little bit too rigid. Maybe we should put some wording in there that says consider eliminating it, so we have some time to study it to try and make a determination right now. Without the information, it doesn't seem too prudent to me.
Is the city's contractor the city? Because most of our maintenance operations are done by contracted, outside contractors. So,
Well, certainly we can dictate how we want our landscaping maintained, so I think we have control over our contractors to the extent that we have written agreements with them.
Well, it's just a money issue. It's the contract guy is going to raise the price of his contract
Right.
if he has to sweep as opposed to blow.
as far as I'm concerned, my objection to the blowers is not the air quality, it's the noise. And so the gasoline ones are, it's under the
That
nuisance
has
section.
been handled in the noise. It's not, they're not banned or regulated, they're just regulated by their decibel levels.
Okay.
So what are we going to do? Take it out?
All right, let's see, do we have enough, do you want a straw vote?
Air
Or Mr.
pollution
Nichols, go ahead.
rules tend to
Wait, when you say
limit,
take it out, are you saying to put it back in or to leave it the way it is?
Delete it.
Delete the requirement that we eliminate blowers.
Well, it's now deleted. Do we want to put it back in?
Okay.
That's the way its draft is. So question is, do we want to put it back in?
Okay.
The air pollution rules tend to limit gas-powered blowers and two-cycle engine blowers. They do not, to my knowledge, talk about blowers that are electric. In fact, they say that those kind of blowers are okay.
Well, all new blowers are four-cycle, and we're in an attainment area. We're not in a polluted area, so they can use them here from air quality. South Coast Air Quality Management District has no problem in Newport Beach.
All right, let's straw vote. Straw vote, Selich, leave it in, take it out.
I'd leave it in, but modify it to say consider eliminating.
All right, just to twist that in.
I'll accept Ed's recommendation.
Mr. Rosansky?
Sure, I'll accept Ed's recommendation.
All right.
I say leave it deleted.
All right, delete, okay. Consider, you got 4 for consider. All right, Ed. Direction, go ahead.
Okay. Moving on to biological.
Oh, hold on, I had a question.
Yes.
On the very first policy, NR 7.1, can you provide background on that and the respective commissions, how they looked at that one?
And I'm trying to remember back to the commission and the change, the requirement for, in the land use policies that you'll be seeing in a few weeks, there are specific requirements in specific locations. So I believe the commission was deferring to the specifics of that element when they would be required and when they would not be required. Because in some places they're talking about walkable neighborhoods being established, and in other locations they were concerned about a retrofit if it was requirement of all development. Because there's some places that are currently developed where you're just not going to have walkable neighborhoods.
What about internal consistency, though, in our land use element? If we say, okay, up in the airport area, Newport Center, we're going to have these walkable environments, we have policies within that to try and implement, achieve that, and yet in our air quality one, we're not. Is there inconsistency there?
I think by the fact that this would be consistent, I think, with the other elements, because it's getting more, in land use, you're being more specific in terms of where this would apply. And the issue also is not just the walkability from the standpoint of pedestrian amenities, it was the issue of proximity of the parks to the schools, because we normally use a quarter-mile radius as sort of the rule of thumb about proximity, and there are a number of existing residential neighborhoods in the city where that criteria will never be met in reality. I think this is a recognition of that, and I think the consistency by providing this as a more general and having specifics in land use, I think it meets the test of consistency.
And I think that that was part of the reason that the Planning Commission changed the first phrase from require development of to provide for, so that we can have
in the other element
more specific policies for some areas that are new development.
Okay. Okay, green light.
Moving on to biological resources, and because this is fairly lengthy, what I'm going to do is break it down for discussion. It'll just help us, I think, move through it faster, and also understand the differences of the Planning Commission. To the first one, goal NR 10, which runs up to the top of page 16, specifically addresses the protection of sensitive and rare, both terrestrial or land-based, and marine resources from development. The one major, and I'm just making sure that there aren't any other major changes in this section, the very first policy was one of the areas where there was a difference between the Planning Commission and the Advisory Committee. And this was also somewhat at the urging of staff in terms of the change made by the Planning Commission. Individuals in the Advisory Committee were concerned about protecting resources before they became endangered, i.e. going back around this from the argument, was that right now all of the resource protections are for species that occur on various lists of being rare, threatened, endangered. They're usually on state or federal lists. The individual, the proponent of the original policy in the advisory committee, was concerned, well, let's hope we never get to the stage of having the species become rare and threatened and endangered, so there's not a diminishment of the species to the point where they would have to become protected. The issue in the committee, in recognition of that, throughout this sort of general policy about the city being proactive in protecting these resources, staff and consultant had concern about how you would ever enforce that. How do you choose which species you are going to protect? Do you protect pigeons on the streets? Do you protect seagulls, which would
Or
be
sea lions.
or et cetera? So we thought it was an unenforceable, unrealizable policy, and hence with that input, the city, the Planning Commission deleted the recommendation of the advisory committee because it was so generalized, and we felt not really implementable, could carry it out. And I believe...
Let's stop right there.
Yes.
Let's have input, because that seems like a major change in this section. The council have any comment on that deletion by the planning? It was deleted by the Planning Commission, right?
I support the Planning Commission.
Okay. Mr. Nichols?
My comment is we're gradually shutting down the back bay, the bay, period. I was recently talking to the Marine Nautical Museum. They were saying the large ships that are coming down, the big sail ships, are all going to have to stay at Dana Point because our harbor is restricted in depth, and we can't really get them in our harbor very easy. I think there were 8 of them total that they were talking about. We're talking about super protection of the marine environment and some of this, and if we don't consider this as sort of a working harbor, we're going to raise the price for private boating to too high a level to be sustained, and we won't have a harbor. We won't worry about it very much longer. And so my feeling is that you have to have different places for different things, and I think that if we're using the back bay for the ecological aspects of this, that's where we ought to be protecting this type of life. And in the front bay, where eelgrass is causing a tremendous cost to the ability to boat, we ought to make it a working harbor and let people use it.
Mr. Nichols, so you're in favor of deleting this?
I'm in favor of leaving it as it is.
Okay, a deletion. Okay, any other comment? Anybody wants to reverse that?
I say put it back.
You say put it back,
Yes.
okay? Anybody else say put it back? All right. Well, you have direction? Good.
Yes.
Move on.
Leave it out.
Okay. If no other comments on this particular section, I just indicate on the policy NR 10.13, so it's not confusing. This was just a relocation. It was not really a change in the policy. It was a relocation of the policy. So there really was no difference between the advisory committee and the planning commission on this particular policy. Goal NR 11 addresses eelgrass, and there were no significant differences between the Planning Commission and the Advisory Committee.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I notice under, NR 17, I'm sorry, which is on page 18, you mentioned the HAMP, the Harbor Area Management Plan, and I think mention of it should be made under NR 11, even under NR 11.1 or 11.2 or 3. Somehow we should
Tie back into it.
Yeah, we should tie it to clearly this entire section.
That's good. Catch?
In 11.1, do we approve of what they're saying there, and how would you determine appropriate sites and so forth?
That's what the HAMP is about. That's exactly what the HAMP is. We're going to create specific areas that are set aside for it.
Relatively to what I was speaking to.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
Okay, then I'll move on to the coastal dune habitats. Again, the relative to goal NR 12, no changes. In NR 13, the wetlands, there were no major differences between the Planning Commission and Advisory Committee. NR 14, addressing the diking and dredging of the channels. And I don't remember the change of NR 14.4.
I think that we have a little error in this document regarding the location. At the top of page 17, the purple, NR 13.3, is the new language that the Planning Commission recommended, but that policy should be in the location a little below. That's NR 14.4, where you can see the former language. And the Planning Commission was concerned about the original language of functional capacity because they weren't sure what that meant and who might define that.
Under NR 14, you mean?
Yes.
Yes.
So the language that's now called 13.3 really should be the new language for 14.4.
Well, okay, gotcha.
Okay.
Okay.
If nothing in that section, NR 15 addresses the dredge spoils, the natural habitats. In this one, there were no significant deviations between Planning Commission
Just a question
and
on
the Advisory Committee.
On your 13.3, do you want to have some phrase in the upper bay or something like that, so that you're, again, stating that you have different areas for different needs?
That doesn't work because there are other places besides wetlands other than the bay, so that it's appropriate the way it's written.
Okay.
Okay. Moving on to NR 16 addresses Upper Newport Bay here. Again, the policies between the committee and the advisory committee and the commission were consistent. And again, the harbor management plan policy that was deleted here is referenced a little bit later, and then again noted as Councilman Ridgway that this is something that would apply and will indicate an introductory language to, in effect, all these policies.
I have a question for Dave Kiff. He's our expert on these Upper Bay issues. Is this adequate, sufficient for where you think we need to be going?
Yes, I know.
Thank you.
He wrote most of them. And then NR 17 addresses the Newport Harbor specifically. Then if not, we'll move on to open space.
One comment on Goal 16 and the policies under that. These speak to the work that's underway now with the Sphere Issues Committee, so we're consistent with that effort.
Alrighty. On page 18 at the bottom, we begin with the open space resources. Again, the major change from the Planning Commission. And let me, the GPAC and the Planning Commission, NR 17.2, as originally written here, the Advisory Committee recommended deletion. The policy was originally written by staff and consultant to consider conversion of public sites designated for open space to other uses only when the conversion will meet a significant public need, and there are no alternative sites that could feasibly meet that need. The Planning Commission felt that it was appropriate to reintroduce that as a statement of the city about the importance of the open space resources within the city.
So where did they reinsert it, Woody?
It's now 18.2.
Oh. So
they deleted what was 17.2 and reintroduced it as 18.2.
18.
The number changes occur because of some changes staff made between the GPAC and the Planning Commission meetings. We had earlier, and this was my mistake, combined the Upper and Newport Bay into one goal, and that was inappropriate. So after GPAC, we separated them, so then the following numbers changed.
So, okay, so it's in, but it's at a different location. Okay. I'm fine. Okay. Just trying to understand this document. It's a little confusing. It's like Sudoku. Don knows what I mean. Okay.
Okay.
Did you want to say something, Nancy, on this point? You seem, I mean, if you have a, why don't you come on up? If you, I mean, this seems to be a.
No, I was just asking, on this one, that we had talked about a significant public need in GPAC.
Let's identify yourself for the record.
Oh, Nancy Gardner,
Okay, thank you.
co-chair of GPAC. A significant public need was our wording, and I noticed they took the public out, so I didn't know whether that was, I was just asking whether that was deliberate or...
That was deliberate.
So it broadens it.
Yes.
Okay. I'm fine with broadening it.
Good.
Okay.
Okay. Next page, archaeological and paleontological resources, recognizing that indeed, you'll see the language introduced about CEQA. Indeed, the mitigation is a normal process and development project review, and these policies reflect those directions. And there were no differences between, and here again, between the Planning Commission, real significant differences between the Planning Commission and Advisory Committee. If nothing here, the next section addresses mineral resources. The one primary resource in the city, of course, is oil extraction. Again, no significant deviations between the Commission and the Advisory Committee.
Now, is there a reason it's just oil versus oil and gas?
Now, there's one policy that lists both, so we probably should...
I mean, just to be consistent.
Probably should be.
We should be.
Thanks.
Good point. Thank you.
Would policy have to be, would the policy number one there have to be modified if we annex the Banning Ranch area, which includes 16 city oil wells, and many more wells that will be continued to be used within the Banning Ranch, so that if it, would that be something that would have to be modified for us to annex those areas? Should we provide for some sort of exclusion for those areas that are in our sphere of influence that currently have oil production?
It's the discussion in the context and the introduction identifies the fact that the already existing operating oil wells are not impacted by charter. So if there's a particular policy that you're concerned about,
the problem would be that in order for the redevelopment of the Banning Ranch area to occur, there has to be a consolidation of the oil wells within that area to where they would move the existing wells to new locations and re-drill. And I wouldn't want this policy to be used in a manner that would keep them from annexing to the city because we have a policy that wouldn't allow them to re-drill their wells in their consolidation.
Can you look at that? Make sure that, I agree with Dawn. I don't know, I don't want to hunt for it because I'm not sure it's here, but I think it's a legitimate comment, and we need to incorporate that.
We can check on that. I think a simple addition also that would say something to the effect, but allow that existing wells be used and or consolidated.
Consolidated is the proper word.
Maybe achieve the objective.
That might work. I guess, is this, would this, I know you mentioned in there that we can continue to use existing wells for water injection systems. Does that prohibit us from I can't remember the terminology, but for redoing an existing oil well to help recomplete an existing oil well to increase its production? Does that prohibit us from doing it or not?
No.
No, it's the same well.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's the same well.
We're using adjacent wells to push water over into that field.
Right.
That's just and we're redoing the lining. I don't see that as...
So additional oil extraction activities are not going to be something that would allow us to improve our production.
Improve the production.
Okay, if we're improving our production, is that going to be an additional activity is what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Oh, that needs to be addressed because our water injection wells, well, we had 16 wells, we've taken 2 out of 3, and we're injecting water in those wells over to the other wells. So if somehow that's preventing, this policy prevents us from doing that, we've got to change it.
Let's just check for consistency with the charter.
We had a conversation about this in the city attorney's office with regard to something else, and there was even talk about drilling additional water wells to support the
That probably won't happen.
Well, just saying that that's what they're saying they need in order to keep the field productive.
They need, it's really complex, because you have to have a specific type of water, and so anyhow, there's a point in time you punt. But I don't think we want additional drilling.
With regard to the Banning Ranch question, we did look into that with the former city attorney when the Taylor-Woodrow proposal was going through its review, and the conclusion at that time was that the charter would not prevent the relocation or consolidation of those wells. I know
I'm
you're asking the
concerned that we would have
annexation
a city
question.
council policy
Yes.
that is
So-
different from the charter.
Plan policy.
Yes, so
And
we
so
will make
wanna
sure that we're consistent with the
this
charter.
is written to allow that to happen.
Okay, moving on to the next section, and we will indeed take that and look at the language to make sure that these issues are covered here. Visual resources, let me indicate also in reference to a question that was raised by the Commission, a number of these particular, actually these topics that we've been addressing tonight will be accompanied by maps. So if there's some question about where ESAs are or where visual resources are, those beside just the list that you see, for example, on NR 21.3, you'll actually see maps that identify these locations. But let me first indicate the first policy addresses public visual resources and the public views thereof and the list of sites. In this area, there was no real significant deviation between the advisory committee and the commissions. One, was there, which one, I'm sorry?
Oh, sorry, next
Coming up.
policy.
Yeah, I know which one's
Next
coming up.
policy.
The NR 22, a series of policies addressing signs and utilities and the visual impacts. Again, no significant deviations there. The next one dealing with the development around Newport Bay and the recognition of this. There was one significant difference on this particular one. The first policy addressed the maintenance of the shoreline height limitation zone to protect views of the water from the public places. The Planning Commission, in recognition with some language that was being considered for the Mariners Mile area in your earlier discussions, and their earlier discussions on land use, did allow for the potential for the modification of that height limit where the buildings would not impact the view shed. And let me use a specific example. If you take a string line from the top of the bluffs in that view corridor down to the ocean, there are some places where if the buildings are tucked back towards the bluffs, that the height limit could actually be increased and still maintain that view corridor down from the bluffs down to the water. So the building would not intrude into that view corridor prescribed by that height. So the policy, as reinstated by the Commission, was to allow the consideration, not to automatically grant it, but considering the amendment of that boundary where the public views would not be impacted, so the maintenance of, in effect, that view cone at that angle from above would be maintained. That was the one significant deviation between the Commission and the Advisory Committee.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
On going back to your 20, again, I guess I'm having a hard time figuring out 21, preservation of significant visual resources. And when I read my copy that was submitted to me in my packet, these yellow, there is wording differential here, and let me just point it out and then let me talk to it. In my policy 20, let me make sure, or 20, I'm sorry.
21.
21.1.
1.1.
Yeah, 21.1, or is it?
It used to be 20.
Okay, never mind. I see where I'm at. No, it's fine. It's fine as redrafted. I see where, it's hard for me to follow.
Can you refresh my memory a little bit? I'm having trouble kind of connecting the dots here. You talked about the Planning Commission changing this to accommodate previous discussion on development on Mariners Mile. What development are you referencing?
The there is a policy in Mariners Mile that in one small area of inland properties of Mariners Mile allows for the possibility of vertical mixed-use buildings. So you might have a lower-level retail with 2 levels of housing, was the direction that was provided in that area, not on the Coast Highway frontage, but back to the back of the properties, the Riverside Drive, back towards the bluffs in that location. Normally, a mixed-use building is going to be 3 stories in height. It would not be the same height as a 3-story commercial building, but it would be higher than the current height limit. The shoreline preservation zone, I believe, is 26.8 feet, 20, I think it's 26 feet. A 3-story mixed-use building would be slightly higher than that. But the purpose of this was to allow for the possibility of a mixed-use building in the land use discussion, and recognizing that that height limit might have to be varied to accommodate structure. But the feeling of the commission was that would only occur if the same view shed that would be achieved, again, taking the string from the top down to the view shed that would be achieved by the 26-foot height would not be impacted.
And where was GPAC on the concept of a 3-story mixed-use development in there?
It's in effect an internal contradiction in the GPAC, because the GPAC supported the land use recommendation for a 3-story mixed use there. They, however, in their particular action, wanted to limit the shoreline height limit, so you effectively have a contradiction.
Okay. And now all of this that we're considering and providing direction to this evening at a later date, that could be amended? This is not set in stone.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and some of these policies we may need to revisit when the land use plan is tightened up.
Okay. So we would get more feedback from GPAC on developments.
Absolutely.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
On the top of page 21, when you're talking about the various different visual routes, you say State Route 73 from Bayview Way to University Drive. I think University Drive should be eliminated, and I think it should go all the way to the easterly city limit. If you look at the little green tail on the map up there, you come over that hill and you look out and you see the Santa Ana Valley and Irvine and UCI, and you get a pretty good view all the way down to Bayview Way, and so I would just suggest that change.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Nichols?
Just a question. We're saying that on private views we do not protect, but we're talking here about public views, and we're talking about protecting them throughout the city. Is this a policy that's even-handed, or is this just apply to public views?
It just applies to public views.
And it's
Would
policy,
this
it's a
also
policy
mean
of the
that we
city.
would trim trees and so forth from the view parks, like coming down Marguerite? We talk about that area. So we're going to trim the trees on the view parks that have grown up over time and things like that? Or are we just, is this just language that's been put in here for fun?
This list in 21.3 is talking about views from roadway segments. There is another policy that deals, it's 21.4, design and site new development, including landscaping, on the edges of public view corridors, including those down public streets, to frame, accent, and minimize impacts to public views.
My question is in 2 areas. One, Marguerite Avenue, San Joaquin Hills Road to Fifth Avenue, just for we've allowed the trees to grow along there on the downstream side of Marguerite, and in particular the view park there at Newport Hills and Marguerite. You've lost your view almost entirely because of trees that are growing up. And in the same way, coming down San Joaquin Hills, from Newport Coast all the way down to Spyglass or on through the Corona del Mar, very much of that view is gone due to the trees that are being planted in the center path. Those are public trees, and on the sides there where we're not taking care of the bushes and so forth. This would apply to us too then, right? I mean,
Yes.
as a city?
But I don't believe there is a policy with regard to maintenance of landscaping. It's the design of the landscaping in the first place.
And in some of those cases, I think the trees are rather smallish now, and over time, they're going to grow up to where there will be views underneath them as you're driving on the San Joaquin Hills, for example.
You're just pretty heavy from what we can see, and you've lost the view going down that corridor almost entirely. I'm not sure that you're not right, that maybe in another 10 years, they'll get up high enough where it won't be quite as bad. But will we then have higher bushes on the side over where we lose the same thing we gained, only now we won't be able to look over the top of them ever?
I think
Whatever applies to individuals should apply to the city as far as maintaining views, though.
Any other comment on this? Okay.
Okay, the goal in our 24 addresses the landforms in the coastal bluffs. There were no deviations between the Planning Commission and the Advisory Committee on these particular policies. And then if no comments on that particular section, the last goal addresses an issue actually that was brought up a little bit earlier about sustainability and addressing the energy conservation strategies. Again, there will be circulation policies and land use policies that will also address, in effect, the same topic in a broader way. And again, there were no deviations in this section from the Planning Commission and City Council.
Any comment, Council? Okay. What's the break point here? Is this time for public comment on natural resource?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to open up the public comment on this portion. Come on up.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, staff, my name's Larry Porter, and I live up in Newport Heights, and I would like to address, if you will, the context of the water supply, and may I have some handouts for you all that I have done in strike-through and in bold letters in those areas where I think the context is an error in its presentation. And leading into this, you cannot have your cake and eat it too. I believe the implication presented by staff is that if you create water demand, water will come and supply that demand. And reality says, and I hope you really present the water supply picture in real terms, that the groundwater basin is quickly falling at an increasing rate. The source of water from the State Water Project that supplies the Metropolitan Water District is not reliable. It flows through the Delta. The Delta, if there is a major flood, if there's a major earthquake, that water supply is cut off just like that. The Colorado River is overallocated. The state of California has had its water supply cut back because it had been taking over its entitlement. So with that reality in front of us, and Councilman Ridgway put in, rightfully so, a supply from the groundwater replenishment scheme. But, however, the water supply situation is not nearly as rosy as what the water supply community would like you to believe. And to be responsible in this matter, you should get to the point where you say, show me the water. I want to know who is entitled to this water, and you want to know how much you get. because it is a vital resource. Air's number one, water's number two. So I hope you do follow mostly what I have presented to you and do a considerable rewrite on the context presented of the water supply. Thank you very much. Any questions, you guys?
Any questions? Okay.
No?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I need to apologize to Mr. Porter. He made some of these similar comments at the GPAC meeting, especially with regard to the percents we show from groundwater versus the Metropolitan Water District. And I did check with our Utilities Department after the GPAC meeting and got the corrected numbers, but they never made it into the report. So we will do that.
Okay, thanks. Nope, that's it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Nancy Gardner, co-chair of GPAC. I would like to thank Councilman Selich for his nice sentiments, but I'm totally confused now. I'm not sure if we are accepting all of GPAC's recommendations except for the ones you discussed, or we're accepting things as they are here with the Planning Commission's corrections, except where we discussed otherwise.
Woody, you have a comment on that? Sharon, you have a comment on that?
I was assuming it was the Planning Commission's changes except where discussed because, well, actually either, whichever changes show on this document other than the ones that were discussed by the council.
Many of the Planning Commission changes were minor wording or sentence structure in most cases if you go through here, and that's why I tried to determine
Some
where
of
those
them
substantial
were actually
ones
good. I think they strengthened the document. But others that seem minor, if you had been part of the GPAC discussion, would not seem so minor. For example, on page 20, just as one example, we didn't want to limit those particular views, to say only those views would be protected, that there might be views in the future that we would want to identify. So, I mean, there are some of these things that I hate to see just, and I know we're trying to get through it fast, because you've got a whole other section to do in the hour, but so just to give it just complete blanket approval to the Planning Commission corrections except for the other ones, I think there's still some that weren't identified in the discussion, or changes that we didn't talk about. And I don't want to take an hour here going through it for you either. I realize that time is of the essence, but I am a little bit concerned because we keep chipping away a little bit at some of these recommendations, and we get away from which doesn't mean that we're necessary. Well, we are right, but understand that there can be changes. But this sort of the minor, seemingly minor word changes often have been the result of a lot of discussion on the part of GPAC to come at the conclusion that we presented.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, Nancy, first of all, we only have a half an hour more.
Okay.
Okay. And secondly, I share some of your frustration. I think we're going to just have to take a bite at this again. Because the document that was handed to us had changes, total, number changes, it became very confusing for me. I think generally, as Councilmember Daigle suggested in the beginning, let's try to support to the best of our ability. GPAC, I think Ed made that same comment. I think Woody and Sharon took down the notes. In other words, I'm saying there's not a white and black answer for you, quite candidly.
As I say, and I thought some of the corrections actually, as I say, I thought strengthened the thing, and I appreciate the fact that you added things that had been deleted. So I'm not crabby tonight.
No, it's okay. We're going to see this a couple more times.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Selich.
Yeah, I would say that I'm just looking at that policy, and if GPAC discussed it, and it was a major thing that they discussed, I would have no problem retaining their language in there.
Yeah, it might be helpful on issues as you see this to give us the reasons. You're hearing this, and there are things that rise to a higher level on your side. It'd be good for us to say, okay, GPAC wanted this because, we're not going on paragraphs, but just for these reasons, boom, boom, some bullets. I mean, because we weren't at those meetings, and that would be helpful.
Maybe I can,
Go ahead.
echoing the mayor, as we go through the next element, if there are places I'm trying to identify, and I totally missed that one,
I
and
just
I
wanted
apologize,
to
that's
observe
my
protocol.
fault. Because the same problem Councilmember Ridgway had, I missed that too, and which color it was in, et cetera. So if you can sort of prod me and let me know if I'm missing something when I don't identify a deviation, I would appreciate it.
I guess unfortunately or fortunately, we're all going to see it again and again. So,
Okay, public comment is still open?
Good evening. My name is Laura Curran. I live in Corona Del Mar. This is the earliest I've ever spoken in front of council. So I know you guys are here for a while tonight.
what's the latest? No, I'm kidding.
Spoken versus attended. Okay. Natural resources, I had the opportunity to attend the GPAC meeting. That was Saturday, the 15th, at the library. Nice place for a meeting, and they really do put a lot of effort into this. So I want to offer some comments. In the narrative on page 4 related to sensitive terrestrial species, it calls out species that are identified by various agencies that have jurisdiction. At the last paragraph, it says, other sensitive species include 27 sensitive wildlife and 24 sensitive plant species. I think it'd be helpful when this narrative is finally published to list those, similar to the streets we listed that we want view protection for, because if I'm a resident and going down and asking for a copy of general plan, it's an educational piece to go, okay, there's the list. So it's a comment request. So in looking at the water quality and water supply component, big picture, my view on this is that there's a lot of progress here. I mean, I know Newport is committed to water quality, but I think a lot of the enforcement policies and where the city's really going to put a lot of its energy is behind policies that conserve water or improve water quality and put the onus on folks that are doing new development. And there's so we really kind of have a carrot and a stick approach. The stick is people that want to build something new. We're going to require them to have conservation. We're going to require them to use appropriate irrigation. But for existing residential buildings and for existing businesses, we're using kind of more the carrot approach. And I would say that we want to really look at that and say carrots are great, with your kids, carrots get them to do things, but sometimes you also need enforcement to get the last bit of progress, because residential and existing residents, existing businesses really are more what we have in our city, because it's almost built out, and they have a bigger impact over time. So that's big picture. I'll talk about some examples. If you look at policy NR 1.2, that's where I think this would apply. We say, establish and actively promote the use of water-conserving devices in both new construction, major alterations, and additions to existing buildings. I think this would also apply to residential and business use. And perhaps you look at that residence, there's ways to look at this. Again, this is a journey. This is policy. Next year, if this passes, there'll be implementation. So at that time, you can start to consider things like residence apartments with over 4 units, commercial buildings of over 2 offices. You can start to quantify it. But I think it's important to think about how this would apply in an enforcement as well as a encouragement context. Going back to, then that applies also to NR 1.5. I think you want to establish educational, incentive, and enforcement programs on water conservation, and in the implementation phase, look at tools such as demonstration gardens, which talk about what plants you can plant that don't require watering, that don't require pesticides. Providing people with examples of California plant palettes. So rather than saying, well, encourage use of California native, saying, here are plant palettes. If you're interested in a certain type of look, go look at this park in the city, because we have some great examples, and we will have more great examples of California plants being used in the landscaping context. And also thinking about how you can partner with local organizations to accomplish a lot of this education and resident awareness, because we have great organizations that are passionate and each have specialties and different constituencies they work with. Policy NR 3.2, which talks about reducing the amount of impervious surface. The discussion at the GPAC meeting was, in this context, also specifically around the parkways. because our parkways are, many people, that's the way I understand it, and I'm ready to be wrong, but the parkways belong to the city, but the residents can pretty much do what they want, except for trees. And a lot of folks pave over. And there's an opportunity, and I know Bob Stein's interested in this, to reduce the amount of impervious surface, to increase the amount of pervious surface. So can you put a carrot and a stick in place? You know, encourage people to plant versus just pave it over, and then at some point you have enforcement. You know, you can't just cement over your parkway. Because, yes, the city can come out and cite them and get them to remove it, but there's a lot of parkway in this city, so how do you make that really happen? So. In NR 416, this item talks more in, I think it's water quality, retain runoff on private property to prevent the transport of pollutants into recreational waters, and develop enforcement policies. I think this one is absolutely essential. I was in an outrigger in the bay opposite of Marina Park the other day, and I finally saw a property that has bayfront, and it has a lawn. I think it's next to John Wayne's house, but I might be off. But big lawn, sloping down grass. I'm sure it's irrigated. I'm sure it gets fertilized. And so there's runoff. And how do you work with the residents to reduce that runoff load? And perhaps that enforcement is there today, but, you know, it's just an example.
Can you...
and I'm getting ready to wrap up here.
Great, thanks.
There was one policy which I was kind of surprised to see, NR 7.8, which said support the development of alternative fuel infrastructure accessible and available to the public and provide incentives for alternative fuel vehicles. What is interesting is this is a really broad statement. Does that mean hydrogen? Does that mean natural gas? That's a really broad statement, and I think that opens up a big can of worms and needs to be more closely looked at. So, that's that comment. So, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Any other public comment on natural resources?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I know we need to move on to recreation. I want to do that. There was a little dagger in the heart there. Much of what the previous speaker was speaking about was related to implementation, and quite candidly, there is no city in this county that does more on water enforcement than the city of Newport Beach. Matter of fact, in terms of 558 enforcement actions last year, in the entire county, over 500 were from the city of Newport Beach. I'm very happy to say we are very aggressive, and perhaps Ms. Curran could attend one of our harbor quality meetings and she could learn this. But we actually hired 3 new employees for the very issue she talked about, where there's running grass. We are out every single day violating those people, without fail. Without fail. So, enough said.
Councilman Daigle?
Yes, Mayor Heffernan, recognizing, too, we need to move on to the recreation element, but certainly the work of GPAC is not done. I look forward to ongoing feedback. The lines of communication are open, and I know at the outset of this process, I was inclined to support Councilman Selich's approach, which is to be as closely aligned to GPAC as possible. I still support that approach. And I really believe that fundamentally we need to be closely aligned with our citizens group on this.
It's good. All right.
Sure. Recreation is the next element. Unlike natural resources, the recreation and open space element we have today is a product of fairly recent history, and our Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Commission reviewed and worked on this element significantly, the existing one. So what we have done on this one is really just a fine-tuning and updating, and as I mentioned previously, focusing it solely on recreation and removing a number of the policies, not removing, but relocating a number of the policies from the existing element, either to natural resources, if they were with regard to open space, and to harbor and bay, if they were with regard to access to coastal resources.
With that introduction, the first section addresses parks and recreation facilities. This is the section that includes the standards and ratios of parkland per number of residents in the city. The one policy that is of some difference, because it's really new, it's addressing a new issue that the city is addressing, is policy R1.3. Up to now, the city has not really had a differentiation standard for what I call higher density housing, the kind of housing that you've seen up in the Irvine Business Complex. You're contemplating in a number of locations, including the airport area itself. We did a fair amount of research nationally in terms of the appropriate standard, and this was suggested for your consideration. This is a standard of 44 square feet of on-site recreational amenities. This is a standard that Anaheim has endorsed for the Anaheim Platinum Triangle recently. It is a standard that is of increasing use as this housing product is increasingly being developed in California, in places like San Diego and Anaheim and other locations as well. So I just wanted to note that. In this section, and again, please, if I'm missing the point here, looking at my GPAC colleague, I believe there are no significant deviations between the council, the commission, and the advisory committee in this section.
I do have a question, Mr. Mayor. On that section, Woody, if it says 44 square feet of on-site recreational amenities, which I have no problem to, it says in addition to the requirements under the city's park dedication ordinance. Again, no problem with that. But what if a development or a high-density development creates on-site areas that are open to the public? We're cutting lines here, fine lines, but at that point in time, do they get credit for that which is open to the public against the in addition? And you're not quite saying that here?
Yeah.
And I think we need to open that discussion, because I can see in these high-density areas where clearly fountains or water elements may be totally open to the public, and why shouldn't they get credit for that?
We wanted to raise this as a balloon to precipitate this kind of conversation. We are, and after our actual discussion with the commission last week, what we want to do is you're well aware there have been some additional investigation of the appropriate development standards for housing in the airport area that you will see in your land use element when you receive that. And we are going to be having an internal discussion about making this work a little bit better, because it's a little unclear, as you just suggested right now, in terms of where the credits lie, where they don't lie, et cetera. And we're going to be meeting with the Parks and Recreation Commission, and in meeting with the commission, we want to bring this up as a specific topic with them as well.
Okay. Specifically that issue, whether they get credit for public improvements on site. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Webb? I have several comments related to the discussion before we get to the policies. Should I make those now, or?
Yes, that's the sequence.
Should go back to?
It won't help to do it in closed session.
I realize that. Let me go back to page 5, and when we talk about park and recreation facilities, it describes that we have the 376 acres, we have a need for 415 acres, and which means that we have a deficit of 38.8. The problem is that doesn't really describe some of the needs that we have for active parks. I think we're getting a surplus of passive parks within the community, and we have not provided, and a lot of the wording in here doesn't describe the need for additional active parks. For instance, as you go down in the table directly below that, in Newport Coast area, it indicates private parks only. We have up in Newport Coast an irrevocable offer of dedication, in which in my opinion, should seriously consider activating that, and somewhere or another, it needs to be shown in these charts that this is an ability for us to get some public park areas. For instance, the new park that has not been opened yet at the top of Ridge Park Road is one that I think if it's offered to us, we should come in there, and our document here needs to recognize that.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
hopefully Mr. Webb and I read the same document, because if you just abstract the chart, of course, everything he said is very true.
Right.
In the narrative, it is in there, and it talks about Ridge Park being a public park being built by the Irvine Company in the narrative. It does not talk about it, however, in the chart. That's impossible in my mind.
Well, I think that we need to have, in the asterisk, it could easily say that, that where it says 0, the city has the opportunity to accept these and make them public parks. Because I think also the park along by the community center, where we're considering the, perhaps accepting the offer for the 2 baseball diamonds and maybe leaving the rest of it private. But those are opportunities for us to add park acreage in this area.
Admittedly, that component is not in the narrative, not the baseball park. Certainly the basketball court is in the narrative. But again, I think it's very difficult to just take a chart and try to impart that knowledge. Maybe if you guys can work on that a little bit, but I'm satisfied everything that Don suggested is clearly in the narrative. I think, however, you have to know the lay of the land. I mean, one thing that is very difficult with this document, I mean, we work with this all the time, year in and year out. We know the lay of the land. It is difficult to pick it up, the nuances or subtleties in the narrative. I guess, so the word to the wise there, maybe we just be much, instead of being, I don't think it's subtle, but I think it could be a little bit better. The narrative could be provide more information, and I think that's what Don's really asking for at the end of the day. More information.
More information and a recognition that we need, even in private areas, to have public parks, because those people have kids who spill out and use parks all over the entire city, and it's responsibility of those areas to also provide public parks.
Well, I know Newport Ridge and Newport Coast has clearly had that discussion regarding their baseball fields. So.
Well, and they basically have told us, no, we're not going to give them to you. They've said, we built them. You've asked whether we will dedicate them to you, and we said, no, we're going to keep them. And that's what they responded when inquired, if I'm not mistaken, City Attorney. And as I understand, the offer of dedication is, if it comes to us, they have the right to lease it for $1 a year for 50 years. And that's what they said they intend to do. And that was the response from the Newport Ridge Community Association.
No.
They want to keep it private.
No.
That's not right. That's the letter I got from Dan Wampos, president of the Master Association up there.
They have no right, if we take the offer of dedication, to keep it private.
I don't think that's the way the annexation agreement reads.
I think
it reads the opposite. I mean, that was part of the pre-annexation agreement. And that's why we asked them the question. There was no reason to ask the question if we could just take it unilaterally. They have the last say in the matter. Mr. Bludow, do you want to comment on that?
No, I think you're right on that.
Okay.
I think that's what they have offered us, though, the ball fields next to the community center, correct?
Yes.
No, we went specifically said, what about the ball fields next to the community center? Are you going to allow those to be publicly used? Are you, when they come to the city's control under the offer of dedication, are you going to exercise your offer to lease them back, as is in the pre-annexation agreement? They said, yes, we want to keep them private. They are not going to be public ball fields.
Is that accurate? I thought that they had said
no. That's what
there
the
was
letter.
A change on that.
No, that's what the letter that came back from the community association when they addressed that specific topic.
I haven't seen the results of that, so
Yes.
I don't know.
That's within the last 30 days. That letter came back
that's a
when
change.
their master, because we asked for that. We asked what was their opinion on it, and then they took it to their board, and that's what they came back with. But listen, we're going to have a meeting. What?
The board is different than the advisory committee. And
Yes.
As far as being a part of the pre-annexation agreement.
No, but Mr. Wampel's part of that committee. I'll be very, very specific on him on that topic. I saw the letter. Their master board looked at it. They're the ones that control that park, and they're the ones that came back with that. There was no mincing around those words.
Well, Mr. Mayor, we're on a recreational element, I guess.
We're talking about public parks and private areas, and talking about the recreational element of the general plan. And I'm just saying, as to those public ball fields, I don't think the city can expect to get them.
And the county required that because every city or public agency recognizes the need to provide certain park areas for every new area that's developed. And this was a new area, and the county said, hey, this is a public park, we'll give you an irrevocable offer of dedication. So that I realize that we have the annexation agreement, that we perhaps need to look at how that can be modified.
Okay.
But that's I just wanted to mention it, that it's a subject that needs to perhaps have more discussion. As we go on to page 7, under service areas.
Excuse me, Mr. Webb, before we leave that, the considering amendment of the pre-annexation agreement might be something that you would want to consider as a policy.
Okay. That sounds...
But it won't be in here, it'll be somewhere else.
Right, it would be later on.
Well, in this element.
But this could provide the discussion related to supporting that policy if we point out that there are private parks that could be public to provide some of the needs, the public needs within the area. On page 7, related to service areas, it kind of indicates that Santa Ana Heights Airport commercial area has plenty of park space, but they don't really have. The one little Bayview Park area is got a couple of basketball courts and a picnic area, but they don't have any place for the kids to go play baseball or soccer or football. And we tend to they overload some of the other facilities in the area, like in my neighborhood is where that's the closest place that these could go, unless you go to some of the schools in Costa Mesa. So we really don't discuss in service area 4. We say there's plenty of park space, but we don't indicate that there's might be a shortage of active park space. And I think that should be mentioned. The bottom of the page, when we talk about the service area in West Newport, when we were discussing earlier policies, we suggested that there be an active sports park constructed in service area 1. And I think that should be mentioned in the recreation and open space element. That was one where I realize there's a substantial area of Banning Ranch that is not in the city, but there's also a substantial area along the boundary between Newport and Costa Mesa, just north of Utility Yard, where an active sports park could be incorporated. And I think that our discussion under Service Area 1 needs to bring out and offer that as a possibility for meeting the active sports needs for that whole side of the community, and maybe even a joint use with the city of Costa Mesa. So I think that paragraph needs to be added on to. It's interesting that in service areas 7, 8, and 9, or 7, 8, and 10 on the next one, that the Corona Del Mar and Big Canyon areas are relying on Bonita Canyon Sports Park for their active sports needs. I realize that these areas are developed and it's difficult for us to provide new active sports spaces, but every time we take a large piece of property and make it a passive open space and a passive park, we're taking away from our ability to sometime in the future get some active spaces. So I think that, I don't know, I guess I'm just pointing out a deficiency in there, and I'm not offering you a solution right now, but the Service Area 12, which was the Newport Coast area, and this is what Mr. Ridgway was referring to, it says, the very first sentence is, this area is deficient in public facilities, but exceeds the city's park ratio. I think that this is where we discuss perhaps the need to recognize what the county did when these properties were developed, of establishing what was to them was going to be a public park use, where in our annexation agreement we have given up portions of that. And so that this is where I think you would tie in the discussion related to perhaps considering an amendment to that agreement. Okay, I've run out.
Mr. Brzezinski?
I'd just like to address the last point that Don made about, I personally, wouldn't be in favor of including language in the general plan talking about opening up that annexation agreement. If you wanted to put in a policy to develop more public park facilities in Newport Coast, that's one thing, but I would steer clear of talking about reworking the annexation agreement in this document.
Where should it be, Sharon? Do you have an opinion?
I think that's a policy decision for the elected officials.
I would like to point out that that policy would probably get a lot of people in Newport Coast pretty upset and maybe against the whole general plan.
Exactly.
Based on
No
that
point in
policy.
losing 8,000 votes right out of the gate. I support more public facilities there, and I wish we could take the ball fields there. I wish we could take all those parks there, but I would not want to tie this document into a policy of trying to renegotiate the annexation agreement at this point.
Okay.
There's a question who you even renegotiate it with.
Mr. Nichols?
I would like to point out that this public-private parks policy was set up well before Newport Coast. Specifically, I'm aware that Jasmine Creek has a pool and so forth that was given credit as park use. It's within their gated community, and it was considered to be their park donation. This has happened at other places. It happened in many in port streets. The center way between the cul-de-sac streets within the port streets is common property to the port streets. It's not. It's getting public use, but it is not public property to my knowledge. And I think we have this standard has been applied over and over again. But I would also like to step back the other one and address Corona Del Mar. Our active our park sites were done away with to a large extent. For example, the area opposite of or area adjacent to Grand Howell Park, between that and Oasis, was originally set up, and it was not to have trees throughout. It was set up to be an active park site for younger kids and so forth. That was done away with when we allowed all the trees to be planted in there. We have another area right now that I'm fighting in that particular area is the Grand Howell, the creek, Jasmine Creek, where I'm trying to get a venue that could be used for concerts and so forth, and to improve that venue. And I don't know what we say it's enforced, and then we turn around and doggone it, they're planting trees again. So they planted 3 or 4 more trees just recently up there, and sure enough, they even put plaques on them. So now we've got to move dedication trees instead of regular trees for no other reason than, I don't know who's doing this, but they have no authority to do it. I mean, we basically even moved some trees out of there the last time. And we're not looking to many of our sites to be public, where they're usable recreational sites. For example, all those in the coastal zone that we've considered on our side of the bay, on the Corona Del Mar side of the bay, have been put into passive parks, whether it be the old golf course site there at Dover and Coast Highway, or the one at Jamboree and Coast Highway. There are no active elements that can be done in those. They've all been turned into passive sites, and now we're looking at the area above the library in the same sense. And here, this area, that's about 500 yards across at the library from MacArthur to Avocado, and as we go up north, that could be a a fine public park site, I mean, where we have active park equipment. It's not even being considered as this. All of this is directly adjacent to Corona Del Mar, where we have a huge deficit, and the deficit is in ball diamonds and in things that the kids can use, and that yes, the beach is nice, but it can't be used to play ball very well. I mean, you can play a type of ball, but not you don't play baseball on the sand, and other people have rights to that as a state park. So I would like to say that we do have a real deficit, and it's a deficit that when my kids were growing up, we had to use somebody else's facilities. We used the Port Streets. We used the Lincoln School. We used other facilities that were outside of our area because there were none that we could use for the soccer teams, for the Little League Baseball, for the other sports. So I think each area needs to have some facilities, and that's the justification that the west side is using for developing some of the parks over there. I think it's a good one.
Okay, do you have a sense here about active parks?
Well, perhaps the best place to talk about that is policy R1.10, which is on page 11, where it says provide additional park and recreational facilities. And you will note that staff originally started with a priority order, and GPAC felt that they should not be in priority order. The Planning Commission restored the priority order. And I think a real question for the council is the list complete, and are the priorities appropriate?
In that respect, I certainly wouldn't agree with number one, but the other one is that you have another policy which states what on page 9, Service Area 10 speaks to Corona Del Mar and says, well, we need facilities, Corona Del Mar, although there is a deficiency in park area, existing active and passive facilities should meet present and future need, provided these facilities are renovated and upgraded to meet demand for sports fields and active recreation. And we're turning all the parks into passive parks. We're not doing any active parks over there. So we're doing the opposite of what this says, and this is the only way to get active facilities in those areas, is to actually, but they're in the coastal zone, we say, and gee, we can't do anything but put passive parks in the coastal zone is what we've given up as far as any new parks.
Yeah, I think that, first of all, that's not policy language, it's background, but I think that is directly out of the existing element. There was no change or update given to that, and so we can work with the recreation staff and the PB&R Commission when we go to them to update that.
If I could also add that the priorities under R110 were established from a joint study session between the Council and the PB&R Commission about 3 years ago, where, as you see them, those were the priorities that were established for development. And that's why it exists the way it does in this document, and we can certainly revisit that. But those were looked at as the areas coming up for development and how did we want to prioritize. And I don't know the background on why those two were established as passive parks. That was long before I came on board. But we also look at what else is available. Now, Bonita Canyon Sports Park is considered a community park to serve the community. And so the 40 acres of sports fields there was not intended just to service the surrounding community, which is the Port Streets, but a good percentage of our community, because there are areas that we are deficient in active sports fields and sports parks, but yet we don't have land to expand and create active sports fields. So Bonita Canyon Sports Park was designed to fill some of that need on that side of town because we don't have any other places to go. Certainly, there are passive parks that have been identified, and that's up, can be revisited, and if those want to be active parks, but those priorities were set about 3 years ago.
Oh, City Manager.
Certainly, we didn't set the priority to put volleyball courts on the other side of town.
Was it just the first three that were established as council priority, and then the
Okay, let's take a step back. Let's take a look at our agenda. It's going on 6:10. We know we're going to start at 7. City Attorney, you've got closed session. You're the agenda maker. How much time do you need?
I'm guessing that between my item and the labor negotiations item, we probably need about a half hour.
Well, that gives us 20 minutes to the minute. Is that enough time, City Manager?
I don't think it's enough time to really do this one justice. I think it needs to be carried over, and I think Sharon has a suggestion as to when it could be carried over.
I think that this element could be continued to the study session on November 8th without any impact to the schedule.
Since it's not coming back to PBR until the 10th of November, is it possible then to
No,
come after the 10th?
because the 22nd, we're doing land use at the city council.
Mr. Selic, you're the master calendar holder. Is that all right?
November 8th, yeah.
Is that okay? You'll stay on track?
Yep.
Is that okay?
Do it.
Okay. Is that fine with the rest of the council?
Sure.
Good, okay. Since we're, okay, what's the procedural rule here? Since we're continuing this matter, is there public comment on this right now?
You can have public comment now, or you could hold it for
Okay, let's hold public
continuation.
comment on this until we conclude the matter like we normally would. But we'll take public comment on anything else. Is that right, City Clerk?
Non-agenda items.
Non-agenda items. Anybody want to talk in general? Okay. Yes. Okay, come on up.
Going back to the topic of water quality enforcement, I'd like a clarification, because I agree, in the harbor, we probably have the very high standards, but one of the reasons I bring this item up is that, for example, there's a property in Corona del Mar on Ocean Boulevard that I walk by it frequently, and they water their grass every morning at 6 o'clock, and the water runs down the sidewalk to the drainage and theoretically into the ocean. So I called up John, who runs, Kapler, and asked him, John, is this an enforcement item? Is this, what can you do? And he said, yes, this does potentially create a runoff issue. But right now, all he can do is go and talk to them and ask them to please look at ways to reduce the amount of runoff from their residential property. And I asked, so that was kind of was news to me. I thought that we had the opportunity to go out and enforce the amount of water running off of people's yards into the sidewalk. I also asked Shannon in the trailer today what her, is it an enforcement item, or is it we can ask, but if they don't want to stop, we can't stop them item. And that's why this comes up, is potentially is understanding where we have enforcement authority versus where we have, you can ask people to make changes, but not necessarily enforcement authority. And that may be different for residential areas that are not in the coastal zone or on the bay versus the bay. And so I would appreciate at some point some clarification on that. And it was brought forward from them also that relates to what is the standard after TMDL in the report, Woody? The Newport. After the TMDL standard, there's
Laura,
There's
I'm
another
gonna,
standard.
If you would, after we leave, Dave Kiff will talk to you, because he knows the rules better than
Okay.
anybody in this city.
But what I want to point out is if there are different standards for different regions, that should be considered as we look at the policy. Okay? And Dave is always very responsive when you ask questions, and his staff is, but that's what I wanted to point out. Thank you.
I might add, just also to add the response to that, one of the policy items or the goals is to update our water quality ordinance, and it's been about 10 years. So whatever issues there are in respect to Ms. Cran's point, then that would be handled within the update of the water quality ordinance.
Any other public comment? Okay, we'll close that. We're going to go to closed session. We'll be back at 7 for the regular meeting. Thank you.